I don't know why she's still here. She's a dispensable asset who runs on caffeine and spreadsheets. That's what I heard through the goddamn glass wall. Lance Kettering, VP of Product, owner of the most punchable smile in 3 states. He was laughing when he said it, leaning over someone's cubicle with his shirt sleeves rolled like he'd just gotten back from saving a burning orphanage. I was 4 feet away, invisible as always, half-eaten salad in one hand and Jira ticket in the other. Listening to my own obituary being workshopped like it was a networking joke. Dispensable asset. After 6 years of cleaning up every fire, this department started. After debugging the server crash on my anniversary dinner from a Red Lobster parking lot because Lance forgot to assign coverage. After patching together the integration module with nothing but duct tape code and prayer because the budget got slashed so he could upgrade the espresso machine in the break room, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I swallowed it like a pill that wouldn't dissolve. Just stood there letting the words dissolve slow and bitter. I was used to being overlooked, but something about that sentence cut deeper. Like I was the office paperclip. Bent, used, and tossed back in the drawer. You know what's wild? 90% of people who hear stories like this never hit the subscribe button. Yeah, I see you. You're sipping your gas station coffee, whispering oh hell no like it's a prayer and forgetting to tap that like. If you want more tales of corporate karma served cold, hit that subscribe. It keeps the stories rolling and trust me, what comes next? You'll want a front row seat. Now, back to Lance. I stood there a second longer than I should have, which was exactly long enough for him to look over and realize I'd heard him. He gave me this wide-eyed smile like a teenager caught shoplifting condoms and tried to pivot. Oh, hey, Patricia, just talking shop? Right, like shop was some euphemism for assassinating the backbone of his entire tech stack. Cool, I said, dry as old toast. Love being part of shop. He chuckled. I walked off, didn't look back. But the sentence kept echoing in my ears for the rest of the day. Dispensable, like the word itself had fingers wrapping around my ribs. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. I mean, I wasn't exactly employee of the month material. I didn't schmooze. I didn't do happy hour. I didn't wear neon heels or laugh at Lance's golf metaphors. But I shipped, I built. I made sure this company didn't fall flat on its smug face every time the wind blew a little sideways. So I sat on the couch, cracked a la croix, and pulled up our production logs just to remind myself of how many times I'd caught Lance's visionary strategies before they crashed the system. The numbers didn't lie. That night, I didn't sleep. Because here's the thing, it wasn't just the insult. It was the realization that I'd spent 6 years being essential, quietly. I was the duct tape, the keystone, the gal who knew where the bones were buried because she buried half of them, and I had the receipts. The next morning, I walked into work with a smile that scared people. Not fake, not forced, just patient. The smile of a woman who'd been underestimated one too many times and started taking notes. Because if Lance thought I was dispensable, maybe it was time to see what happened when I let go. That's when they brought in Ethan. Quiet kid. Nervous hands. Looked like he got lost on the way to a comp sci midterm and ended up in corporate America by accident. Everyone assumed he wouldn't last a month. Especially Lance, who called him Junior like we were all living in a bad sitcom. But I saw something in him, something familiar, and I had plans. The first time I met Ethan, he apologized for existing. Twice. Once when I bumped into him near the microwave and he dropped his Tupperware of sad rice and string beans, and again when he handed me a merge request like it was a court summons. Sorry, I'm still figuring out the branching structure, he stammered, eyes flicking everywhere but my face. I glanced at the code. It was messy. Not broken, just unsure of itself like the person who wrote it. He hadn't messed anything up permanently, which in our department counted as a small miracle. You didn't light the building on fire, I said, handing the printout back. That's a win. He laughed, more a wheeze than a chuckle. Kid looked like he hadn't eaten a full meal since the onboarding pizza. Pale, always blinking like he expected to be hit with a Nerf dart or a layoff notice. Welcome to Nexora, Ethan, I added. We survive mostly on caffeine, sarcasm, and the misguided belief that someone in management knows what they're doing. He smiled for real that time. It was small, lopsided, but real. Lance, of course, didn't notice him. Barely even acknowledged his existence except to bark vague directions like ask Patricia how we do deploys, or run this through Jenkins, or whatever. Classic leadership by deflection. The only time Lance looked at Ethan directly was during an all-hands when he forgot Ethan's name and called him Ali. So naturally, Ethan started hovering around my desk like a stray cat who couldn't decide whether I was safe or a boot in disguise. I didn't mind. In fact, I saw something in him that reminded me of, well, me 6 years ago. Wide-eyed, overwhelmed, wondering which mistakes would get me noticed and which would get me fired. I started helping him out quietly. No big displays, just nudges, suggestions. I rewrote a few commits, then walked him through why. Explained what code review really meant around here. Translation: don't make Lance look stupid, even accidentally. Showed him where the real knowledge was stored, hint, not in Confluence, but in a private Slack group called Dead Man's Switch where the senior devs kept actual documentation like it was Cold War intel. He was sharp once you cut past the nerves. Started picking things up fast. I'd correct a function once and never have to repeat it. Even caught a bug in one of Lance's pet modules, though I gently convinced him not to flag it in Jira. Office Politics 101. Never outshine a narcissist unless you've got an exit strategy or a parachute. Over time, he stopped apologizing so much, got steadier, bolder, still quiet but with an edge. One afternoon, after cleaning up an authentication mess left by a dev who'd rage quit mid-sprint, Ethan looked over and said, "Why do we keep fixing all this without credit?" I tilted my head, because if we stopped, the whole thing would collapse. And if we complain, they'll just hire someone cheaper to replace us. He blinked. That's bleak. That's corporate, I replied. But that sentence haunted me more than it should have, because he was right. We were the scaffolding holding up a building that kept calling itself a castle, and we were expected to disappear once the ribbon was cut. I didn't plan on getting attached to the kid, but something about the way he listened, really listened, wore me down. He asked questions that made me think. He was raw, but he had a backbone. And he saw the cracks in the system the way I did, saw them early instead of 6 years in like me. So I started showing him the ropes. Not just the where's the staging server ropes, but the deeper ones, the buried systems, the legal ductwork, the compliance relics no one looked at anymore. One evening, long after most people had gone home, we were elbows deep in a deprecated API nightmare when I pulled open a drive labeled Old Infra and said, "Ever seen the Clause library?" He shook his head. I opened a folder. Nested, obscure, but there it was. Clause 14.3c, the original custodian document for the modular authentication layer. My name on the digital ink, dated, sealed. Never revoked, he read it once. Then again, his brow furrowed. "This still stands?" he asked. I smiled. "Unless someone officially updates it, yeah, and nobody ever does. They assume the system just works." He sat back in his chair, processing. I could see the wheels turning. "Why show me this?" I paused before answering. "Because knowing where the leverage is matters." He nodded, slow, said nothing more. But I saw it, the spark, the quiet kind. The kind that waits, learns, and eventually acts. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel quite so alone. They scheduled it for 9:07 a.m. Not 9 o'clock, not 9:15. No room for small talk, no chance to pretend it was anything but what it was. I knew the moment the calendar invite landed, color-coded and sterile, subject line, strategic resource review required attendance. HR in the sender field. No agenda. Just one quiet dagger between two budget meetings. I wore black, not out of drama, out of precision. A silent signal to myself that something was dying today. Maybe not me, but something I'd built, something I'd carried on my back for too damn long. I walked into that glass-walled aquarium like it was a baptism in bleach. Inside, Danielle from HR, blinking too much and wearing the nervous smile of someone who once gave me a secret Santa candle and now had to hand me a corporate death sentence. And of course, Lance, elbows wide on the conference table, tapping a Montblanc pen like he was signing autographs instead of contracts. He didn't even stand when I walked in. "Patricia," he said, like it pained him to remember my name. "Thanks for joining." Danielle inhaled like she was about to perform mouth-to-mouth. "We've been conducting a company-wide optimization strategy review, and unfortunately, it's the budget," Lance interrupted, grinning like a game show host announcing a bad prize. "You know how these things go." I nodded slowly, letting them talk. I wasn't going to make it easier with questions. I'd seen this script before, just never with my name on it. "Your role, while valued, overlaps with some newer strategic directions," Danielle added. "This isn't a reflection of your performance." "Of course not. It never is. They don't fire you because you're bad. They fire you because someone wants your chair for their nephew." I looked at Lance. He was enjoying this. Not in a cruel, mustache-twirling way, no, that would at least require passion. He was enjoying it the way you enjoy a vending machine finally giving you 2 bags of chips. Unexpected bonus. No emotional investment. "We appreciate everything you've done," he said, like I was a babysitter they'd outgrown. And then came the kicker. "We're happy to give you 2 weeks paid transition time," Danielle said, sliding a branded folder across the table like a Severin stuffed Happy Meal. I stared at the folder, then at her, then at Lance. He gave me the smirk, the one that said this was always going to happen, just not fast enough. I folded my hands, calm as still water, and said the only thing that didn't taste like blood. "Understood." That word sat in the air like fog. Danielle blinked again, surprised I hadn't begged or exploded or cried. Lance tapped his pen twice, like a drum roll for nothing. I stood, took the folder, and walked out. Not fast, not slow, just precise. Past the intern who was already eyeing my desk. Past the break room fridge where someone had stolen my yogurt again. Past the open-plan jungle of keyboards and clacking and Slack pings and people pretending not to see. Back at my cubicle I sat, just sat. My monitor was still on. Jenkins was mid-build. Ethan had left me a sticky note, "Deployed your fix?" with a little doodle of a robot giving a thumbs up. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't pack anything. I didn't cry. I emailed Ethan a single line, "Keep your head down, but keep your eyes open." Then I logged out, but not before one last stop. I opened the folder labeled NDA Locked Archive, dug past the old project specs, past the buried flowcharts, past the decaying bureaucratic fossils nobody ever thought to delete, and I uploaded one file. Just one. Clause 14.3, see Custodian Auth Module PDF. Then I closed the tab, cleared my cache, and walked out without looking back. Lance might have thought he won something that morning. He hadn't seen the board yet. He hadn't read the contract. He hadn't asked who still held the keys to the thing that made his $150M pipeline look shiny and investor-ready. He would, oh he would. 3 days after the meeting, the fog lifted. Not all at once, more like mist peeling off a lake at sunrise, slow, quiet, reluctant. But underneath the numbness, something new started to take shape. It wasn't rage. I'd burned through that. It wasn't grief. I hadn't lost anything worth mourning. It was clarity. Cold. Sharp clarity, like finding a map you forgot you'd drawn, with a red X marked long before you knew where you were going. I didn't go to work, didn't need to. I still had remote access for the duration of my transition period, a phrase that sounded like it belonged in hospice care, not HR policy. Nexura's IT hadn't revoked my permissions yet, because nobody in legal had waved a red flag. And nobody in legal waved red flags unless you made them. So I logged into my personal cloud archive. Not the official Nexura drive, the one they'd probably sanitized already, but the encrypted corner I kept off-grid. My own little graveyard of legacy code, stubbed modules, dependency trees, and every mistake we ever fixed under cover of darkness. And there it was, buried under 3 folders of backlogged build notes and a zip file called Do Not Delete V2, like I'd been leaving myself breadcrumbs all along. Clause 14.3, C, Custodian Auth Module PDF. I clicked it open. It was ugly, legalese layered in corporate mildew. But the sentence was still there, plain as ever. Primary custodianship of the modular authentication framework, including all derivative logic and branching subarchitectures, remains assigned to the original architect of record, P. Wexler, until superseded by formal redesignation approved by compliance and legal. Dated, initialed, backed up. Archived, and this was the kicker, never updated. 6 years ago, we drafted it in a fit of startup paranoia back when everyone was scared of IP theft and contractor lawsuits. The clause was a failsafe. Back then, I didn't think much of it. It was just one more paper in a stack of paperwork no one ever read. But now it was a lit match in a room full of gas. They never redesignated it, never rescinded it, never even asked. I wasn't someone they planned around. I was the scaffolding they forgot to dismantle. My name still lived on the only module that mattered, the one powering Nexura's new licensing deal, the one they'd spent the last year polishing for market. Lance had built his little press tour around it, called it a revolutionary leap in security infrastructure, said it future-proofed our entire platform. Funny, because legally, he didn't own it. I sat back in my chair, exhaled, and for the first time since that meeting, I smiled, not a bitter one, not angry or smug, just satisfied, like a craftsman checking the final seam on something carefully, silently stitched. I didn't send it to legal. I didn't email Lance. I didn't make a noise. Instead, I picked up my phone and called Ethan. He answered on the second ring, breathless. Patricia, you busy? Just hiding from Lance. He wants me to draft a status doc on the licensing rollout, but he keeps changing the specs mid-sentence. I chuckled. Some things never change. I was gonna ask, how you're doing? I'm fine, I said, better than expected. He hesitated. I still don't understand what happened. They didn't even give a reason. One day you're the glue holding this place together, the next, gone. I opened the clause, took a screenshot, texted it to him mid-call. He went quiet. What's this? Clause 14.3c, I said. It's in the original framework charter. Custodianship of the modular auth framework. I could hear him clicking. This is real as your anxiety dreams about Jenkins. Holy Patricia, this changes everything. If legal sees this, they haven't, and I haven't shown it to them. He was silent. Then, in a low voice, why show it to me? I didn't answer right away because I needed him to sit with it, to understand. Finally, I said, because you're the only one still listening, and because knowing what something's worth is only half the game. Knowing when to use it, that's the other half. He was quiet again, but this time it felt like gears turning, not uncertainty. I didn't need to tell him what to do. I didn't need to spell it out. I'd planted the seed, that was enough. Lance had underestimated me. He was about to underestimate Ethan too. They rented a damn spotlight, not metaphorically. A literal spotlight. Mounted in the corner of the atrium, sweeping across rows of standing desks and demo booths like this, was the Oscars for white-collar mediocrity. I watched it all unfold via the internal live stream from my living room, coffee in hand, slippers on, trying not to grind my teeth into chalk. Nexura had closed the $150 million licensing deal with Sondra, multinational that couldn't code its way out of a wet paper bag, but had deep pockets and a fetish for buzzwords. And Lance, dear, dazzling, hollow-skulled Lance, had turned the announcement into a company-wide event. Press on site, photographer with a ring light, branded cupcakes with Nexura's logo printed in edible ink, They even rolled out a branded innovation backdrop for selfies, which looked like someone fed clip art into a blender. Lance took the stage with the subtlety of a game show host on Adderall. Today, he beamed, marks a new era in Nexora's legacy. A vision that began 18 months ago has now become a product that will reshape authentication in the enterprise space. This was no small feat. It took bold thinking, strategic leadership, and of course he placed a hand to his chest like he was about to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, the kind of technical foresight that only comes from true ownership. He paused for applause. He got it. From people who didn't know better, who weren't there when he signed off on skipping QA for a faster go-to-market, who weren't on the weekend call when we had to roll back an entire build because his vision introduced a memory leak that nearly wiped client-side login histories, who didn't know the framework's core had been architected in a cramped server closet by a woman eating stale almonds and praying Jenkins didn't crash mid-deploy. Me. Not a word about me. Not a nod. Not a thank you. He name-dropped 4 product managers who hadn't written a line of code, gave shout-outs to marketing for positioning the message with elegance, even thanked his family for believing in the vision, as if his kids had debugged the recursive loop that nearly killed the API call stack last spring. And at the very back of the room, flanked by 2 potted plants and a catering table, stood Ethan. I saw him on the live stream, arms crossed, back straight, face blank, but the kind of blank you get just before the dam breaks. Not anger, not shock, something deeper. Disappointment scorched into silence. He was wearing the tie I gave him. Navy, clean, conservative. That it made him feel like someone. Now it just looked like armor. I could tell he hadn't clapped. The camera panned back to Lance, who was now showing off a slide deck filled with stats and phrases like scalable integrity and modular trust orchestration, which meant exactly nothing. Then came the final slide, $150M signed. Global licensing rights secured. Vision by Lance Kettering. And below it, his face. Photoshopped heroically. Chin raised. Eyes full of pretend purpose, as if he'd personally hand-stitched every line of back-end logic like some kind of artisanal coder. I wanted to throw my coffee mug through the screen. Instead, I muted the live stream and opened Slack. I hovered over Ethan's name. Typed, still think it's too early? Waited, watched, no reply, but I saw the typing dots flash, stop, then start again. Then nothing. He was thinking, weighing, that was enough because the walls were closing in. Lance didn't know it, but the floor under his Italian loafers had started to crack the moment he opened that PowerPoint and claimed full ownership of a system whose legal foundation still had my name burned into the stone. It wasn't my voice on the stage, but it didn't have to be. Ethan was in the room, and he knew what I'd built, where the bodies were buried, where the documentation lived. What clause lived at the bottom of the repo like a sleeping dragon with my initials stitched into its scales. Lance had made his move. The next one wouldn't be loud, it would be lethal. The room was too quiet for a celebration. This wasn't the atrium circus with cupcakes and photo ops. This was conference room C, the one with the frosted windows, the low ceiling, and the silence that felt like it had a weight class. No live stream, no applause. Just 6 people seated around a long oval table pretending this wasn't about to blow up something very expensive. At the head of the table, Lance, still in his showman suit, only now it looked tight across the shoulders. His tie was crooked. His eyes flicked toward the legal rep like he expected a pop quiz and forgot to study. Legal was there in force. Natalie from compliance. Aaron from contracts. One of the interns from the legal review rotation who looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and die. And Ethan. Quiet, clean-cut Ethan. Tie knotted with surgical precision, folder in hand. I wasn't in the room, but I'd given him everything he needed. Natalie cleared her throat. Before we finalize the transfer agreement, we need documentation verifying IP custodianship for the core authentication module. Lance blinked. That's been handled. It's not in the clause log, it's part of the legacy asset register. Checked it myself. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Can you show us? Lance hesitated like the air had thickened and he couldn't quite get his voice through it. The architecture team owns it. I delegated. To who? Natalie asked. Silence. And that's when Ethan placed the folder on the table. Neat, measured, deliberate. I think this is what you're looking for, he said, calm as a surgeon holding out a scalpel. Natalie opened it. Inside 3 pages. 1 signature. Dated. Indexed. Stamped. Clause 14.3c. Aaron leaned forward. Read it again. This says custodianship of the modular authentication system remains assigned to Patricia Wexler. Lance shifted in his seat. That clause is outdated. It was from the early development cycle. A formality. Was it rescinded? Natalie asked. It didn't need to be. Was it redesignated? Aaron pressed. I delegated internally. Informally, Natalie's voice was flat. Informal delegation does not override documented custodianship. The air in the room snapped taut. Ethan sat very still. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't smirking. Just letting the document speak like he'd simply turned on the lights in a room full of rats. Lance reached for the folder. Natalie blocked it with her hand. We'll need to pause the licensing execution until this is resolved, she said. Pause? Lance barked. We've already signed. Contingent on final custodianship verification. Aaron replied, flipping to the contract addendum. Paragraph 6, it's very clear, but she doesn't even work here anymore. Doesn't matter, Natalie said, cool as an avalanche. Custodianship doesn't automatically dissolve upon termination. It has to be reassigned in writing, with consent from the original architect. And in this case, Ethan added, finally looking Lance dead in the eyes, that was Patricia. Lance looked like someone had just poured ice water down his spine. No bluff, no pivot. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I wasn't aware you gave a keynote, Ethan said, voice steady, called it your vision, but the foundation you stood on still belonged to someone else. No one said anything after that, not for a long moment. The silence was glacial, final. Even the intern had stopped breathing. Finally, Natalie stood. We're going to need to reevaluate the IP chain before we proceed. Aaron nodded, and someone needs to contact Patricia Wexler. Ethan didn't smile. He just sat there, watching Lance shrink inch by inch, like a balloon with a slow leak. The man who had posed under a spotlight 48 hours earlier now looked like he couldn't find the door, let alone explain how he'd built the system he supposedly owned. The table, the air, the floor, all belonged to someone else now, and her name was still on the document. By 9:04 the next morning, the internal Slack channels were curiously quiet. No gifts, no happy Thursday, chatter from the HR social committee, just one terse memo from legal stamped confidential and addressed to the executive tier. Licensing delay pending custodianship clarification. 5 words that sounded like legalese, but in this company. That was code for someone lit a dumpster fire, and now we all get to roast marshmallows around it. They dragged Lance into the executive review board meeting 30 minutes later. This time, it wasn't just legal. The CEO was there, Ku, head of compliance. Aaron again, now with a thick binder labeled IP ownership chain review, which he slammed on the table like it owed him money. Lance walked in trying to look casual, but the swagger didn't stick. His collar was wrinkled, his eyes were red. For the first time since his fake cry speech about leadership resilience during last year's layoffs, he looked genuinely rattled. Let's talk about Clause 14.3c, the CEO said without preamble. Lance exhaled hard, as if he'd rehearsed for this. It's an outdated clause, a clerical holdover from a prior version of the system architecture. The core module has evolved significantly since then. Natalie from compliance didn't flinch. Has it evolved into something not built by Patricia Wexler? Silence. Lance's jaw twitched. The current system is built on top of her framework, yes, but so it still relies on the original architecture she authored? I mean, in a legacy sense, maybe, but it's modular. The dependencies are, Aaron cut in. No, we verified the dependency map last night. Your system branches off her original module like a scaffold. The authentication layer is still foundational. The CEO leaned forward. So why wasn't this clause updated? Lance opened his mouth, closed it. We assumed custodianship rolled over when she left. You assumed? The COO echoed. Lance floundered. There was never any formal indication that her custodianship was still active. It just wasn't on anyone's radar. Aaron flipped to a page in the binder. Because you failed to flag it during the last compliance review. Submitted a signed IP custodianship transfer form with the name left blank. The CEO blinked. You submitted a blank signature field? Lance shifted in his seat. We were rushing the filing. The quarter was closing, so you cut corners. Strategic acceleration, Lance mumbled. Ethan was seated near the side wall, again, quiet, hands folded, but when the room turned toward him, he didn't flinch. Ethan, the CEO asked. You worked with Patricia directly, correct? Yes, did she indicate any knowledge of her continued custodianship? Ethan nodded once. Yes, she showed me the clause and the documentation supporting it. Did she attempt to weaponize it? No, Ethan said flatly. She never raised it. She just kept the module isolated, compliant, documented, and secure, like she always did. Aaron added, her version history shows perfect consistency with compliance protocol. 0 unauthorized alterations. The module was never rolled into broader dev branches without her sign-off. So, Natalie said slowly, she held the key the whole time. The room went still again. Lance, desperate now, tried another angle. Okay, but let's not pretend this is some kind of sabotage. She had ample opportunity to communicate this concern. If she wanted clarity, she could have brought it up. Aaron slammed the folder shut. She did. To the person you assigned to replace her. The CEO looked at Lance like he was a mold growing in the corner of a shower. You told the board this IP was clean, that there were no custodial conflicts. There weren't, Lance started. There were, the CEO snapped. You just didn't know or didn't look. Either way, your job was to know. Lance deflated like a balloon left out in the sun. Every justification he'd polished for years, his metrics, his market speak, his glossy investor deck, none of it mattered here. Not with the clause on paper. Not with Patricia's name in ink. Not with Ethan backing her up with steady calm that made Lance look like a clown trying to juggle legal grenades. In a glass-paneled room down the hall, I sat watching the security feed on mute. Ethan had given me access, his transition gift, he'd called it, a quiet window into the reckoning. I didn't smile, not really. But there was something in my chest, a stillness, a knowing. Lance had always treated me like scaffolding. Something temporary, necessary but disposable. Funny thing about scaffolding, pull the wrong pole and the whole damn building shifts. They called me in on a Friday. No agenda, no heads up, just a brief message from Aaron, polite but heavy. The board would like you present for the custodianship resolution review. 11 a.m. Conference room A, not C, not the legal pit. A, where the executive board met behind soundproof walls and million-dollar secrets. I hadn't stepped foot in that room since year 2, back when Nexora was still a startup and people still remembered who built things. I wore gray, no jewelry, no makeup. Just the version of me that had always been there, clean, measured, forgettable until someone needed saving. When I walked in, the room was half full. The board was already seated. 6 figures with iron suits and agenda binders, flipping silently through paperwork that had my name on every 4th page. Aaron gave me a respectful nod. Ethan was in the corner again, calm and composed, a silent anchor. Lance sat at the head of the table, or what used to feel like the head. Today, it looked more like a throne built from napkins. His tie was gone, jacket wrinkled, sleeves rolled up like he'd been fighting for his career all morning and lost every round on technicalities. They motioned for me to take the seat at the far end. Not at the table, against the wall. I didn't flinch, just sat, legs crossed, hands in lap. Natalie began. The board is currently reviewing the legal viability of executing the licensing deal without a full custodianship transfer from Miss Wexler. Clause 14.3, C, remains binding. You're in breach if we proceed without her signature. The CEO added, Sondra has been notified of the pause. They are unhappy. Translation, there were lawyers circling in the water now. Lance hadn't spoken, not yet. He kept glancing at me, like I was a ghost sitting in the corner of his mansion, reminding him he didn't own the foundation. Finally, he spoke. Quiet, controlled, but tight around the edges. Did you plan this? 6 syllables, acidic and desperate. Room shifted like everyone exhaled through their teeth at once. I didn't blink. No, I said, you planned this. I just documented it. Silence, pure, dense silence. The kind that clings to your skin, that sticks in your throat. Lance opened his mouth, then shut it again. Ethan cleared his throat and addressed the board. The module in question was kept isolated by Patricia per protocol. We validated the access logs. There were no shared forks, no unauthorized changes. Our documentation is complete, signed, and unbroken. Natalie confirmed. It meets every internal audit requirement. The COO looked at Lance. So you built an entire campaign around a module you didn't technically own. Lance mumbled something that sounded like it was the same system. It was hers, the CEO snapped. And you stood on a stage 2 days ago and told the world it was yours. I sat there, unmoved. No gloating, no victory lap, just the truth, laid bare under fluorescent light. Lance looked at me again, eyes bloodshot, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. I didn't look away, because here's the thing about power. Real power doesn't shout, it doesn't strut. It doesn't hold press conferences, it waits, it documents. It builds quietly in a corner until someone thinks they can paint over it, and then the walls shift, and suddenly they realize the foundation was never theirs. Patricia, the CEO, said, I'll be in touch formally regarding custodianship transfer options. You're under no obligation to sign anything today. I know, I said, nothing more. I stood when they dismissed us. Lance remained seated, didn't say another word, didn't follow me out. He couldn't, not when the board was still staring at the throne he'd built on sand. The memo hit the company inbox at 6:12 a.m. on Monday. Subject, temporary leadership transition, product division, no pleasantries, no euphemisms. Just a blunt announcement that Lance Kettering was being removed from all licensing deal oversight, effective immediately, pending internal investigation into documentation irregularities. They didn't even give him the courtesy of a farewell email. By 10 a.m., every glass wall on the 3rd floor buzzed with whispers. Screenshots of his keynote Slide with Vision by Lance Kettering were now meme fodder. One engineer photoshopped it to read, Built on a Lie by Lance Kettering. The post got 87 emoji reactions in the first hour, most of them popcorn. The intern who used to fetch his $6 lattes now sat at the desk beside Ethan, quietly updating the authentication branch permissions that had, until last week, been tied to a name no longer welcome in the room. They reassigned the licensing project to a crisis response team. Aaron was looped in full time. Legal pushed back the Sondra contract by 30 days, citing custodianship integrity review. Translation, clean up the mess and fast. As for me, they tried. The head of HR reached out by noon. We'd love to discuss a new opportunity with you, Patricia, Director of Systems Integrity. A dedicated role overseeing infrastructure continuity and IP custodianship. The salary was a leap. The title came with a parking space, a corner office, direct line to the executive suite, but I'd already said yes elsewhere. The offer came through 3 days prior from Viridian Tech, one of Nexora's competitors. Smaller, quieter, no press stunts. They reached out after hearing what happened. Word travels fast when your documentation derails a $150M deal. They didn't ask for a second interview. They didn't lowball. They offered equity, ownership. A blank slate with a single condition, build it right. I accepted. On my last day inside Nexora's walls, I returned my badge, boxed up a few personal items, one plant, a coffee mug, a notebook full of diagrams they never bothered to read, and stopped by the conference room where it all unraveled. It was empty now. Still. But in my mind, I saw it all again. The suits, the silence, the folder with my name in print, the way Lance's voice had cracked when he realized the floor beneath him wasn't real. Memory played like a film strip clicking to a halt. I turned, walked out. No applause, no drama, just gravity. Lance never spoke to me again. I imagine he's still trying to find someone else to blame, still rewriting the story in his head, trying to pretend he tripped over red tape instead of the truth. But the board knew, legal knew, Ethan knew, and me? I didn't need a parade. I didn't need vindication printed in bold font. I had something better, a new desk, a real title, my name inked beside a contract that meant something, and the knowledge that while some people build empires on hot air, I'd built mine in silence. Stone by stone, line by line, clause by clause, I was dispensable until they realized what I held. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear. I knew something was off the moment I got the meeting cancellation email, sent by my intern. Not Kyle, not HR, not even a half-hearted Outlook autoresponder. Just a passive-aggressive line from Aiden, the 24-year-old who once asked me what a shared drive was. That was the moment, the flicker before the wildfire. My name was removed from the Q4 audit prep chain, my calendar suddenly empty, and my Slack mentions replaced with chirping silence. For the first time in 12 years, no one asked where the new compliance checklist was. That checklist didn't just write itself. It was a Frankenstein of legal patches, audit flags, and security rituals only a masochist like me could love. But now, apparently, Frankenstein was too legacy for Kyle's grand vision. Kyle, God help us, a finance bro with a perfectly ironed shirt and a mouth that constantly chewed invisible gum. He strutted around like he'd personally invented quarterly reporting. Said things like synergy and streamline in meetings that never needed either. The man once asked if a VPN was a vitamin thing. And now he was in charge of cleaning house before the Q4 audit, the same audit tied to our $300 million insurance renewal and about 42 contracts with our biggest clients. You know, nothing major. But here's the thing about working in compliance. If we do our job well, nobody notices. If we screw up, we're crucified. For over a decade, I kept this company clean, patching systems after data breaches, building the audit vault from scratch when IT said too complex, and embedding so many layered redundancies that even I sometimes forgot what the hell I'd buried where. I was the digital locksmith with the only damn key. And that key wasn't just a password, it was biometric. Physical, literal, you can't streamline your way around that. Now they were treating me like a fax machine. Too old, too in the way. Legacy and efficiency, Kyle called it in a team huddle that he conveniently forgot to invite me to. I heard it from Marcus. Junior IT, bright kid, quiet, pays attention. He said your kind of institutional memory, Marcus told me over coffee. I nearly choked. Institutional memory? Like I was a forgotten attic box with old manuals and floppy disks. That's when I knew. They weren't just pushing me to the side. They were gearing up to erase me. And still, I showed up every day, answered questions that shouldn't have been mine to solve, patched holes no one else saw, and watched my inbox go colder than Kyle's soul. The worst part wasn't the erasure. It was knowing how deeply screwed they'd be without me, and how blissfully unaware they were of it. By the way, if you're still listening and haven't tapped that little subscribe button or dropped a like, now's a good time. Seriously, it takes you half a second, and it tells us this kind of story hits home. Keeps the whole crew motivated to keep digging up these wild corporate tales, you know. Anyway, I sat in my office one morning, watching Kyle through the glass as he high-fived someone over a spreadsheet. My name was gone from the budget, just like that. No farewell email, no thanks for 12 years of keeping our asses lawsuit-free. Just a slow deletion, first from meetings, then from systems, then from memory. But they forgot one thing, the digital vault. The one holding every audit record, compliance certificate, and third-party inspection report from the last decade. The one I built myself after the great data breach of 2017, when the CISO nearly cried in front of the board. That vault didn't just open with a password. It required a token, my token. And the system knew my fingerprint, my encrypted key file, and the specific sequence of time-locked approvals I'd buried like digital landmines. And as I watched Kyle slurp his green juice and brag about how lean Q4 would be, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I knew something he didn't. That lean was about to go very hungry. Kyle didn't even stand when I walked into his office, just swiveled in his chair like a man about to order lunch. There was no "Hey Diane, thanks for 12 years of unmitigated disaster prevention," no handshake, no fake smile, just a plastic expression and a stack of papers he didn't even pretend to read. He gestured to the chair across from him like I was a door-to-door coupon rep. "Hey, so look, we're making some strategic pivots ahead of Q4, he said, already holding a pen like he expected me to sign something. And your role doesn't align with the new compliance model. We're, streamlining, that word again. Streamlining. To become Kyle's go-to euphemism for gutting anything he didn't understand. Streamlining meant cut the people who have been here long enough to know where the bodies are buried. Streamlining meant make it look like innovation while actually lighting the server room on fire. I didn't flinch. Just tilted my head and blinked like I was trying to understand a foreign language, which, frankly, wasn't far off. He continued, fidgeting slightly now. HR will, walk you through the transition package. We're calling it a soft offboarding. He smiled like he'd coined the term himself. We really want to make this gentle. Gentle, I repeated, more to myself than to him. He nodded too quickly. You're not needed for Q4, but we deeply appreciate all you've done. Truly. Ah, there it was, the line. I stood without touching the chair. I looked at the man-child VP who had just severed a 12-year artery from the compliance team with all the ceremony of deleting a spreadsheet row. He didn't ask about the vault. He didn't ask about my transition notes. He didn't even know what I did, not really. I could have told him I ran the back end using a network of raccoons and lawn gnomes, and he would have nodded. So I smiled, nodded back. Understood, I said. Same way you'd say it to a barista who forgets your order. Then I walked out. HR was already waiting outside like a vulture that had RSVP'd to a funeral. Some chipper girl named Brittany with acrylic nails and a laminated checklist. We're so sad to see you go, Diane. Truly, let's grab your things, yeah? She chirped like we were going purse shopping. I followed her through the hallway, eyes averted, a few awkward sorry glances. One guy mouthed WTF and ducked into the printer room like I was radioactive. The air smelled like overcooked coffee and guilt. When we reached my office, well, my former office, I saw they'd already boxed some of my things, like I was a guest overstaying checkout. A sad little goodbye card sat on my desk, signed by 3 people, none of whom spelled my name right. There was even a slice of store-bought cake on a napkin with the word luck in blue frosting. I tossed it in the trash. As Brittany flitted about, asking if I needed a moving bin, I calmly opened my drawer. Inside, tucked behind a dusty compliance manual and my backup mouse, was the small black lanyard I never let out of my sight. Hanging from it, my encrypted USB token. This wasn't some Best Buy flash drive. It was a custom-made access token with a rotating authentication handshake tied to my biometric profile. No one else could use it. No one else even knew what it really did. I unclipped it from the lanyard, slipped it into my blazer pocket, and zipped the pocket shut. You all good? Brittany asked brightly, holding a tiny box like it contained healing crystals instead of 12 years of corporate defense mechanisms. All good, I replied. We walked down the hallway in silence. HR's version of a perp walk, minus the handcuffs but with all the humiliation. Kyle didn't look up from his desk when I passed his office again. Too busy streamlining, I suppose. I exited the building without a single backward glance. No grand farewell, no speech. No tears, but inside that zip pocket, that little token held more leverage than Kyle could ever dream of. And the best part, he didn't even know it existed. The first night, I didn't sleep, not because I was crying or spiraling. No, I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, sipping lukewarm wine from a mug that said world's okayest employee. The silence was loud, the kind that hums in your bones and rattles around the spaces left behind by shock. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing, but something in me had shifted. I could feel it, like the slow stretch of a fault line under cracked earth. The rage came later. Quiet rage, controlled, like fire behind glass. Not the kind that screams and punches walls. The kind that plans. The kind that remembers everything. I got calls. Friends from the office. One from Janet in finance, whispering like Kyle had bugged her phone. You gonna sue? Because I'd testify, Diane, I would. What they did, it's garbage. I thanked her. I meant it. But no, I wasn't going to sue. I wasn't going to write a dramatic LinkedIn post or blast off emails with subject lines like my story. Because when you've worked in compliance as long as I have, you learn one thing real fast. Paper trails are powerful, but silence? Silence can kill, so I powered up my home terminal. The one only I used. No one at the company even knew it existed. That's the beauty of working in the trenches. You build your own backdoors. Not to exploit, not to spy, but to protect. From amateurs, from arrogance, from Kyle. I logged into the system like I had 1,000 times before. Only this time, I wasn't patching bugs or compiling reports. I was removing myself from everything. One by one, I revoked tokens, not the obvious stuff, the VPN, the Slack channels, the email aliases, that would have left a footprint. I'm not stupid. No, I slipped out the side door. I disconnected silent scripts I'd embedded in the Vault subdirectory. I rerouted pings. I disabled emergency fallbacks. Then came the flag. Buried 6 layers deep under a legacy compliance protocol I'd coded back in 2018 was a single flag. One Boolean switch, marked in a naming convention only I understood. Harmless looking. Invisible to anyone who didn't know it existed. I flipped it. Just like that, the audit vault went into what I used to call guardian mode. It didn't lock everything down, no drama, but it added a single authentication requirement to access the core reports. Biometric confirmation from my token. Not my password, not my badge, me. My fingerprint, my token, my timing. Kyle wouldn't find it. Even IT wouldn't unless they dug through 10 years of version histories and understood the logic trees I built like spiderwebs. And even then, without my key file, good luck. I sat back in my chair. The room was still dark. My wine mug was empty. My laptop screen glowed like a smug little nightlight. No alarms, no flags in their system, just silence. I turned off notifications, killed all alerts, logged out. Then I stood up, poured myself a glass of real wine this time, and opened the back door. The night air hit my face like a reset button. Cold, honest. People think revenge looks like a grenade. They expect noise, smoke, screaming. But the best revenge, it's a vacuum. A missing key, a quiet no. A door that doesn't open because the person who used to hold it walked away and took the only copy. It was the kind of message you don't expect on a Saturday night, especially not while you're elbows deep in a half-baked lasagna and a true crime rerun where the husband is always the killer. My phone buzzed, and I nearly ignored it, probably another pity text from a well-meaning coworker or one of those spammed sorry to hear about your transition. DMs from recruiters who didn't even know what I did, but this one caught my eye. Marcus H., IT analyst at Omnicore Logistics. Subject, quick question. I paused. Marcus, the quiet one. Always wore the same two cardigans, brought lunch in Tupperware labeled with masking tape like someone raised by Depression-era grandparents. Bright kid, underpaid, overlooked. Which is probably why he noticed the things no one else did. I opened the message. Hey Diane, weird question. They're trying to open something in the audit system and it's asking for your credentials, like specifically your token. Just thought I'd ask before Kyle's head explodes. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, smirking at the image. Kyle, sweaty and confused, poking at a keyboard like it personally insulted him. I typed back slowly, not my department anymore. Hope they're prepared. 3 dots popped up instantly. Marcus was typing like his life depended on it. Yeah, I figured, but he's seriously losing it, said something about manual override. IT told him we couldn't bypass the vault because of that? 2017 hardening protocol, the one you implemented after the breach. He tried a root key and everything. Just got an error. I stared at the screen. Of course he did. Kyle thought root access was a magic spell. What he didn't realize was that the system's root was only the first gate, and I'd buried a dozen more behind it. Like Russian dolls, each one more specific, more paranoid, more me. I waited a minute before replying. I trust they're consulting the documentation. Another fast reply. There is no documentation, at least not for this. I think you kept it off the main repo. Of course I did. The documentation was real. It existed. It was printed on paper, stored in a sealed envelope in my filing cabinet. At home, labeled in my handwriting, open in case of extreme stupidity. I didn't tell Marcus that. He didn't need to know yet. Sorry, Marcus, my access was revoked. Nothing I can do. I added a little smiley face to soften the blow. Old school passive-aggressive professional energy. The kind they taught us back when email was formal and getting fired meant a meeting, not a link to an HR portal. Didn't write back right away. Maybe he was afraid Kyle would appear behind him like a cartoon villain, breathing down his neck with a smoothie in hand. I put my phone down and returned to my lasagna, but something about the whole exchange lingered. Marcus had reached out, not because he expected help, but because he trusted me. Knew, deep down, that the vault wasn't broken. It was working exactly as intended. Kyle was just the wrong man with the wrong key, trying to force open a door he didn't even know how to knock on. An hour later, another message arrived. No context. Just a quote copied from Kyle, apparently screamed across the IT bullpen. Who the hell put her in charge of the system? I laughed, out loud. Nearly dropped my wine glass. Who put me in charge? The board, Kyle. The board put me in charge 7 years ago, after you were still interning at some consulting firm pretending to be Goldman Sachs. They gave me the keys. And I didn't just take them, I built new locks, welded the hinges shut, and installed motion sensors you'll never even detect. And now, you locked yourself out of your own kingdom, because you thought the queen was just part of the wallpaper. By Monday morning, the office was vibrating with the kind of desperate energy usually reserved for fire drills or CFO indictments. Something was clearly wrong, laptops flying open, people actually reading emails for once. Someone even spilled their turmeric latte in the hallway and didn't stop to clean it up. A real crisis. Not a pretend deadline crisis, but the kind that smells like job loss and bad decisions. The third-party auditors were scheduled to arrive in exactly 36 hours, suits from a firm that billed $900 an hour to point at spreadsheets and nod gravely. These were not the kind of people you impressed with donuts and LinkedIn quotes. These were the people who asked for traceability logs going back 5 years and expected to have them in hand before they finished their first overpriced espresso. Kyle, naturally, was convinced this was just a permissions issue. Can't we just reset the password? He barked, according to Marcus, who at this point was sneak texting me updates like a war correspondent embedded behind enemy lines. Just reroute through admin access. Come on, it's a vault folder, not the Pentagon. Except it may as well have been the Pentagon. Because when they tried to access the core compliance vault, the encrypted archive that stored every single policy cert, audit trail, and security patch since 2013, they hit the wall I built. And it didn't blink. First layer, digital key file, hashed and split across 2 rotating authorization windows. Second layer, biometric trigger, my fingerprint, paired with a time-sensitive token handshake that expired every 72 hours. Third layer, a logic gate that required both to sync. No override, no forgot password link, no call IT for help. Just a polite little message that said, Vault integrity confirmed. Primary authentication required. That was the system's way of saying, you're not getting in unless Diane says so. Kyle refused to accept it. He stormed into the IT war room, which was really just conference room C with the blinds closed and 3 too many pizza boxes. I heard from Marcus that Kyle actually pounded the table with his fist like he thought it would make the code submit. What do you mean there's no backup? This is a billion-dollar company? It's not about backups. Someone explained to him gently, probably wishing they'd used up their PTO. The backups are there. We just can't read them without the decryption key, which is tied to her biometric profile and her token. That's how the system was hardened. Kyle blinked like they were speaking French. Who hardens a system that much? He growled. I believe Diane did, after the 2017 incident. The 2017 incident, the Great Breach. Year someone clicked a phishing link from an email titled Urgent. Your Petco rewards are expiring and nearly exposed the payroll database to a ransomware bot. After that disaster, I'd been given full authority to rebuild the compliance archive. No red tape, no budget limits. The CTO at the time, God rest his prematurely retired soul, had told me to make it Fort Knox but without the gold. So I did. The problem for Kyle was that he wasn't around back then. He didn't know about the protocols. He didn't know I'd taken that directive very literally. And he sure as hell didn't know that my departure had quietly tripped the Vault's legacy flag, the one that required active biometric verification during audit prep season. A flag I'd buried so deep, even the CTO forgot it existed. Now he was standing in a room full of stunned IT analysts, each one more nervous than the last, while the clock ticked toward a $300 million insurance renewal that depended on passing this audit with flying colors. No big deal, he muttered through gritted teeth. We'll just contact her. She'll give us the file. She has to, right? No one answered. Kyle looked around like the room owed him something. Entitlement dripping off his overpriced watch. Right? He repeated. Still no answer, because everyone was thinking the same thing. You pushed her out, you dismissed her. You erased her from the company like she was a line item that didn't matter. And now Diane was gone. And so was the key. Kyle always fancied himself a closer. The kind of guy who watched too many Aaron Sorkin shows and thought speed talking through problems counted as leadership. So when the auditors arrived, 3 gray suits with 0 patience and clipboards full of red ink, Kyle did what Kyle does best. He lied with confidence and hoped no one noticed he was drowning. We've had a minor delay with the archive sync. He told them over conference room coffee so bad it should have come with a hazard label. We're transitioning systems. Compliance has been undergoing optimization. Our reports are clean, just waiting on one. Minor credential reconciliation. Totally under control. The lead auditor, a woman named Joyce with eyes that could fossilize a man at 10 paces, didn't even blink. We requested those files 7 days ago. The documentation tied to your risk coverage clause explicitly states access must be demonstrated within 24 hours of request. You're currently in violation. Kyle gave a little chuckle, his nervous tick when caught pants down. Oh, we're not in violation, we just haven't surfaced them yet. Uh-huh. Joyce scribbled something, then set down her pen like it weighed 100 pounds. Then show us anything. Partial logs, verification hashes, a staff credential chain, even a screenshot of last year's cert alignment. You've got 10 minutes, 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Kyle tried stalling with PowerPoint slides. One was literally just the word trust in bold Arial over a photo of a mountain. Joyce closed her laptop. I'll file a preliminary noncompliance notice unless documentation is produced by 6 p.m. That's when the real panic began. Legal started sniffing around, led by Carter from Risk, an ex-litigator turned internal watchdog with a face that had never smiled. Where's the access trail? He demanded. Who approved the system transfer? Where's the chain of custody for the compliance archive? Kyle squirmed. It was inherited. Diane handled it. She didn't leave documentation. Then why the hell did you fire her before the audit? Carter snapped. It was a reorg, Kyle muttered, losing steam. She wasn't collaborative. Her methods were outdated. I mean, she built this thing like a Cold War bunker, which we now can't get into, Carter interrupted. It didn't take long for the stink to rise to the boardroom. The chairperson's assistant sent a terse message. The compliance audit is under scrutiny. Provide clarity on access failure. Do not wait for weekly update. Suddenly, everyone remembered my name. That's when Kyle panicked and did what cowards always do, blame the person who's no longer in the room. She sabotaged the system, he told Risk. This was intentional. She designed it to fail without her. He floated the idea in an emergency all hands, hoping the lie would land before the truth had time to load. Diane acted maliciously, he said. We've uncovered evidence of deliberate encryption misconfiguration. But he hadn't, because there was no evidence, because I didn't sabotage anything. I just built the system exactly the way I was asked to, resilient, airtight, paranoid as hell. They gave me full autonomy after the breach, and I used it. Now they wanted to pretend that doing my job too well was the real crime. Marcus, meanwhile, kept his head down, said nothing in meetings, wore his cardigan, ate his tuna salad. But that afternoon, he forwarded me a series of screenshots. Internal Slack messages, meeting transcripts. One from Kyle Reed, spin this, make her look like a disgruntled ex-employee, say she withheld credentials out of spite. Another was from legal, no proof of sabotage. Vault design was approved by former CTO. Access structure matches documented specs. Blaming her won't hold up if it escalates. And finally, from Marcus, thought you'd want to see what they're saying. Just, wow, I stared at those messages for a long time. I didn't feel angry, I felt ready. They wanted a villain, they were about to find out what happens when you try to make the locksmith the thief. 12 hours, that's how much time stood between Omnicore logistics and a fiscal implosion. The kind of chain reaction collapse that doesn't just ruin reputations, it guts partnerships, triggers clawback clauses, and sets fire to every bonus projection from here to next Christmas. The insurance carrier, Gravestone Mutual, a name that sounded like it already knew what was coming, had sent a formal request for compliance documentation, including complete access logs, third-party verifications, and full system integrity reports. All of it had to be submitted before 9 a.m. Eastern, no extensions, no grace period. Buried in the fine print, in language Kyle never bothered to read, was a stipulation. Non-delivery of complete audit trail results in suspension of coverage. That meant every single contract reliant on insured logistics, pharma, federal subcontractors, air freight would be immediately void until coverage was reinstated. And reinstating coverage, that took weeks. The board knew, legal knew, risk knew. Kyle was finally starting to understand. The conference rooms were lit up like triage tents. People pacing, arguing, trying to locate long-retired compliance officers who had nothing to do with the current system. Marcus told me they even tried to plug in an old hard drive, labeled Backup 2019, that made a noise like it was coughing up its own lungs and promptly died. Someone actually asked, "Can we just build a new compliance vault from scratch by morning?" Marcus told me the room went silent for a full 10 seconds before someone replied, dead serious, defined scratch. At around 8:20 p.m., my phone buzzed, unknown number, voicemail. I watched it blink. Let it ring out, then curious I tapped play. Kyle's voice spilled into the room, breathless and tinny like a man talking from the bottom of a manhole he'd just fallen into. "Hey Diane, listen, this is Kyle. Hope you're well. Look, we're just doing a last-minute pass on some of the Q4 prep stuff and we hit a little snag with one of the archive systems. Just wondering if you had a sec to maybe chat about access?" A pause, totally chill, just hoping to reconnect. No pressure. Just give me a ring if you can. Appreciate it. The message ended with a beep so pathetic I half expected it to apologize too. I sat there in my living room, lights low, fireplace flickering even though it was barely cold out. Just ambience. My laptop was on the coffee table, the terminal screen black, silent. I didn't move, didn't reply, didn't feel anything. Because this wasn't about bitterness. This wasn't even about revenge anymore. This was about clarity. About showing the difference between a paper leader and the person who quietly kept the machine from burning to the ground. While Kyle paced around the office, sweating through his overpriced button-up, people started whispering. Not about me, for me. Someone in contracts asked Marcus why we ever let me go. A woman in vendor relations said, wasn't Diane the one who designed the post-breach lockdown? And someone else, the CEO's assistant, apparently replied, yeah. And she warned us about putting finance in charge of IT. Guess we're feeling that now. The ship wasn't sinking. It was rotting from the inside. And the only one who had the pump, the map, and the damn compass was me, and I was drinking tea, watching it go down, quietly, precisely. Just like I was trained to do, not with fire, with absence. At exactly 12:02 a.m., my inbox pinged. No Slack, no text, no voicemail this time. Just a subject line sitting in my inbox like a white flag dipped in desperation. Urgent assistance needed, audit system access sender, Charles D. Haverson, CEO, Omnicore Logistics. Now that was new. Charlie had never emailed me directly in 12 years. Not once. Not when I built the compliance archive from the bones of a failed ERP migration. Not when I single-handedly locked down our HIPAA protocols after the medical logistics acquisition. Hell, not even when I saved the company from a $2.5 million ransomware payout by isolating an infected node before it spread. But now that the roof was collapsing and Kyle was holding a wet pool noodle instead of a fire hose, suddenly I was worth a direct message. I clicked it open, slowly. Diane, we've hit a serious roadblock ahead of tomorrow's audit. I understand you're no longer with the company, but we need your help. No one here has the necessary access to retrieve the archive files. Your work was exceptional. We trusted your judgment. Now we're asking for your support to ensure Omnicore doesn't face serious consequences. Please let me know if you're willing to assist. We would, of course, compensate you appropriately. Regards, Charles Haverson, CEO. I read it while pouring hot water into my teacup. Chamomile. No caffeine. No adrenaline needed. Just a gentle herbal sip to wash down the taste of poetic justice. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, not because I wanted him to sweat, but because in that moment, it became very clear to me that this wasn't a rescue mission. They weren't calling for help. They were trying to unburn a bridge they torched with their own cigars, so I left it there. No reply, no bounce back, just silence. Let that echo around the boardroom for a bit, because while Charlie was busy composing that email, another conversation was happening upstairs. The board had convened an emergency call. Marcus forwarded me the bullet points from someone who couldn't resist live updating the chaos via group chat. Board Chair Linda S. Kyle, can you explain why the person with exclusive access was removed without a knowledge transition? Kyle, we had no idea the system was designed this way, Linda. So you fired the person holding the keys. Kyle, I didn't know she was the keys. CFO, you're telling me the vault Diane built is inaccessible and you didn't even ask her for decryption instructions. Kyle, she wasn't? She wasn't collaborative. CTO from vacation, I signed off on that design. We gave her full autonomy after the breach. The vault doesn't have a fallback. Linda, we're 12 hours from noncompliance. You fired the one person who can save us. I imagined Kyle in that moment, red-faced, sweating through his undershirt, trying to piece together the house of cards he'd built out of buzzwords and bravado. Probably blaming IT, blaming legacy systems, blaming me, because when you're mediocre and cornered, blame is the last thing you know how to throw. The thing about systems like the one I built, they work perfectly, until the people running them stop listening to the ones who understand them. So there I was, tea in hand, email unread, bored in freefall. All of them finally realizing that the one person they tried to erase had become the most critical missing piece, and I hadn't even stood up yet. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree on meth. 18 missed calls, blocked numbers, unknown IDs. One even tried urgent from legal like I'd be tricked into answering out of fear. Cute. I sipped my tea, flipped through the call log, and waited. The 19th call came through, blocked. Again, I let it ring once. Twice, then picked up, letting the silence do the talking. Diane, a voice I didn't recognize, composed, crisp, older, professional in that terrifying, high-powered lunch in a windowless room kind of way. This is Linda Sutherland, chairwoman of the board. I leaned back in my chair. She didn't fumble, didn't sugarcoat. We made a mistake, she said. It landed flat and cold, exactly how it should have. I didn't gloat, didn't sigh, just replied, yes, you did. There was a pause. I let her feel it, then calmly, I can unlock the system, but only under my terms. I want a formal consulting contract. 1-day engagement, 6 figures. She inhaled like she wasn't used to being told prices. I didn't stop. I want Kyle removed from all decision-making protocols effective immediately. No access to compliance systems. No override permissions. No revision authority. Another pause. I could practically hear the boardroom holding its breath on speaker. Done, she said, just like that. No negotiation, no questions, just quiet submission to the woman they'd tried to erase. At 6:47 a.m., I arrived at the office. Not my office, just the office. I wore jeans, a hoodie, and my oldest sneakers. No badge, no clipboard, no performance. Kyle was there, of course, standing in the hallway like a condemned man trying to look useful. His tie was crooked, his hands twitched like he didn't know where to put them. He didn't meet my eyes, didn't say a word. I walked past him. The elevator ride was silent. Marcus met me outside the vault room, trying hard not to smile. He looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. Good morning, I said softly. He just nodded. They're waiting inside. Inside was a scene: CEO, legal, risk, 2 board reps, and a third-party auditor who looked like she'd skipped coffee out of spite. No one spoke. I pulled the token from my coat pocket and inserted it into the reader. The light blinked. I placed my finger on the scanner. The screen flashed once. Then access granted, reports populated, logs decrypted, certs validated. A collective exhale swept the room like someone had opened a sealed tomb. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I turned to the room and said, "You're good to go." No applause, no praise. Just stunned silence and the kind of awe usually reserved for surgeons and astronauts. As I walked out, Marcus caught up with me. His face was lit up like someone finally let him exhale. He handed me a mug, white ceramic, black letters, not needed for Q4. I stared at it for a second. Then I laughed, really laughed. It felt good. I thanked him. He grinned. Kyle stayed in the hallway, glued to the wall like he hoped I wouldn't notice him. I did, but I didn't stop. Didn't gloat. Didn't need to. Because revenge isn't screaming in someone's face. It's walking past them so calmly that they have to wonder for the rest of their lives what else you were capable of. I never raised my voice. Only my value, and they'll never forget it again. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him. I knew something was off when I walked into the Monday sync and my name wasn't on the agenda. Again, 3rd week in a row. No updates, no questions. Just Nathan steamrolling through slide decks like a discount cruise director with too much hair gel and not enough self-awareness. I sat there, sipping lukewarm coffee from my chipped world's okayest strategist mug. pretending not to notice that the Sable Enterprises update, my account, my pitch, my relationship. It's being attributed to general team efforts, which is corporate for we're stealing your baby, Aaron, but please smile for the group photo. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he really did think I was overloaded. Maybe those temporary reallocations were actually temporary. But then he started referring to my original proposal deck as a legacy document. As in, we've moved on from that legacy doc Aaron put together. Like I was a ghost haunting my own project. And ghosts don't get invited to pitch meetings. I found out the Sable strategy call had happened after it ended. The calendar invite went out, just not to me. The kicker? He used my deck. The one with the blue border, the side note about Sable's CTO's obsession with modular design systems, the market segmentation flow I built from scratch. It was unmistakable. A junior analyst even pinged me on Slack to say, "Nice deck today." Nate crushed it. He crushed it with my blood, sweat, and perfectly kerned typography. If you're still here, listening to this, I'll pause for a second to ask something quick. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, maybe even a like. 90% of folks never do, and honestly, it keeps this little revenge machine going. It's the corporate version of a high five after slapping a fraud into the next fiscal quarter. Anyway, at first I thought maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe Nathan really is just trying to streamline. But when I asked him about it directly, he chuckled, said something like, "You're so detail-oriented, Aaron, but I think you might be too close to the project. It's good to get fresh eyes on it, you understand." And he patted my shoulder like I was some intern who brought the wrong coffee order. That was the moment the fog lifted. This wasn't about bandwidth. This was erasure, dressed up in beige corporate jargon. And I was just supposed to smile and disappear while he danced across the finish line in my shoes. So I did what any sideline strategist with 2 decades of experience, a petty streak, and a Google Drive folder labeled "Oh hell no" would do. I started documenting every file version, every email where my name was scrubbed from the CC list, every calendar invite that somehow skipped me but included Nathan D. Personal Gmail, yeah, that one raised an eyebrow. I kept a private tracker in Notion labeled Sable Shenanigans, and with every entry my suspicion inched toward certainty. And that certainty carried a familiar taste. Coppery, bitter, a slow simmering rage that I'd felt once before. When my old roommate pawned my guitar for rent money, and then gaslit me into thinking I never owned one. I wasn't about to let that happen again. Because here's the thing about being invisible. It gives you the best seat in the house to watch everyone else trip over the lies they think no one's looking at. And I was looking. Closely. It was a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday where the break room smells like burned popcorn and broken dreams, and the coffee machine makes a sound like it's dying in Morse code. I was on my way back from the printer, where, by the way, someone had once again left 37 pages of cat memes queued up when I bumped into Jonah. He's one of our interns. Baby-faced, probably still thinks of work-life balance as a real concept. He grinned, all wide-eyed and caffeinated. "Hey Aaron," Nathan was bragging about that Sable deal earlier. Said it took personal charm and timing. Pretty badass. My jaw didn't drop. My face didn't twitch. I just nodded like I'd heard someone mention the weather. But inside, something cracked. Charm and timing? The man couldn't charm a stapler and had the timing of a drunk raccoon. That client didn't fall from the sky. I'd been courting Sable Enterprises for 8 months. I learned the CTO's kid's name, knew which snacks to order for meetings based on dietary restrictions, and once sat through a 2-hour Zoom on edge computing just to understand their tech roadmap. Nathan didn't even know how to pronounce their CEO's last name. After Jonah left, whistling some god-awful TikTok tune, I walked straight to my desk and pulled up the internal doc management system. I didn't even know what I was looking for, I just knew I'd find something. It didn't take long. 3 weeks ago, Nathan had accessed the master prospect file. The timestamp was clear, 10:32 p.m. on a Thursday. That file was mine. I created it. Labeled every slide, every research annotation, every behavioral analysis chart. And he had downloaded it, made a copy, and renamed it Sable Pitch Final V2ND. ND, Nathan's initials, like a dog peeing on someone else's hydrant and calling it landscaping. I kept digging. Buried in the admin panel was a changelog showing that 5 documents, including my original proposal deck, had been marked as obsolete in the system. That's how they quietly vanish from the searchable archive unless someone manually flags them for retention. It's not deletion, not officially. It's just digital disappearance with plausible deniability. My proposal deck, the one that earned us the first exploratory call with Sable, was gone. On paper, at least. But I'd made a PDF copy months ago, labeled it Pitch Sable Org Final. Seriously, this is it. PDF because I'm a realist. The arrogance of it all was what got me. He didn't even bother hiding the breadcrumbs. He thought I wouldn't look, or worse, he thought I wouldn't matter. You ever feel that slow burn of suspicion melt into something harder? Something like clarity dipped in contempt? That's where I landed, because it wasn't just credit he wanted. It was control. Ownership. If this deal closed and he'd let it, he'd ride that wave straight into a director title, maybe VP next fiscal. Meanwhile, I'd be the background static in his origin story. The woman who helped with some early research. And no one would question it, not if I didn't speak up, not if I let it slide. But I wasn't going to scream. Screaming is for people who don't have receipts. I started a new folder that night, not on our servers, on a flash drive. The old school kind metal casing, dangling from my keychain like a quiet threat. In it, every file version, every calendar log, every time-stamped edit from my original deck, along with screenshots of his downloads, archive flags, and Slack messages where he conveniently forgot to loop me in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was strategy. And I was about to become the variable Nathan didn't account for. Nathan caught me in the hallway like he was ambushing a deer in hunting season, overly cheerful, too eager, and carrying a manila folder like it was holy scripture. "Hey Aaron, got a quick thing for you," he said, glancing around as if anyone gave a damn what we were whispering about. "Need you to wrap up the Sable contract. You've got the best rapport with them." Rapport. That's what we were calling it now. Not months of groundwork, not late-night research calls, not customizing our pitch deck to mirror their boardroom politics. Just rapport, like I'd smiled pretty and patted the client on the head until they signed. I played it cool. Nodded, of course, I said, anything to help. He handed me the folder like it might explode. Everything's basically done. Legal's already reviewed. Just need your finesse on the final call and signature process. You know, smooth things out. Smooth things out. Jesus. I took the folder and didn't even look at it until I was back at my desk. It was too light. Maybe 10 pages total. The real contract was supposed to be at least double that, and this one had so many black bars and redactions it looked like an FBI file on Bigfoot. The IP section, the very heartbeat of any tech consulting deal, was barely a paragraph. No definitions, no ownership breakdown, no language about post-delivery control, just some hand-wavy nonsense about third-party vendor coordination subject to internal agreements. That was the first flag. The second was the clause labeled 6.3, which referenced external stakeholder entities as per Appendix D. There was no Appendix D. In fact, there were no appendices at all. Just a line in the footer that said prepared by ND. Not legal, not contracts, just Nathan. Like he was trying to cosplay as a compliance officer and forgot the part where people read this stuff. I stared at the folder for a full 5 minutes, willing it to explain itself. Then I emailed a copy to Marissa, a friend in legal who owed me a favor from when I helped her clean up a disaster on the Paxson account last year. I marked it confidential, added a note. "Off the record, does this look reviewed to you?" Her reply came 12 minutes later. Short answer, no. Long answer, this is either a first draft or someone's trying to launder something shady through an unapproved template. Want me to escalate? I typed back, not yet. Just needed a gut check. Appreciate you. Then I pulled up our internal contract library and did a side-by-side comparison. The difference between this one and the standard SOW template was like comparing a Lego instruction sheet to a building permit. Whole sections were missing: compliance, IP custody, indemnity triggers, and most critically, the audit trail of vendor registration. But the language that really caught my eye was in Section 8.2. All IP deliverables will be managed via a designated holding structure until final project closeout. Holding structure. Not client ownership, not consultant IP retention. Just a generic, vague placeholder. I ran a keyword search on the company intranet. That phrase, designated holding structure, popped up exactly twice. Once in an archive pitch doc for an old partnership that never closed, and once in a side contract Nathan authored during a small dev handoff last year. That contract had been quietly pulled back after finance flagged it for lacking oversight. I remembered the whisper campaign that followed, how Nathan spun it as a one-time miscommunication. Now it looked a hell of a lot more like a practice run. I closed the folder, locked my screen, and stared out the window. The city looked smug in the afternoon light. Buildings stacked like spreadsheets, cars moving like emails on roads paved with promises nobody reads. Nathan had just handed me his smoking gun and asked me to pull the trigger. But I wasn't going to shoot blindly. No, I was going to line up every shot until the moment it counted. And when it landed, it wouldn't just sting, it would bury him. The moment I saw my own signature on a contract I never signed, something inside me didn't just break, it calcified. It was late, almost 8:45 p.m. Office half dark, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they were tired of pretending to. I was supposed to be at home, nuking leftover lasagna and watching reruns of The Good Wife. Instead, I sat hunched over my monitor, cross-referencing the redacted contract Nathan handed me with the archive proposal logs. Something didn't add up. The formatting was too clean, like someone had taken a scalpel to the dock and stitched it back together with corporate jargon as the gauze. I opened the revision history. We use a cloud-based system for internal versioning. Nothing fancy, just enough to cover our asses if someone accidentally deletes something critical. I scrolled through the older saves and paused at one file marked Final Client Ready Aaron Sig PDF. The timestamp was 2 weeks ago. Funny, I hadn't touched that contract in a month. I opened it. My digital signature sat proudly at the bottom next to the project code and client designation. Same font, same stylized initials. The only problem, I never signed it. I never even saw this version. My jaw clenched so tight I heard something click in my ear. I pulled up my DocuSign logs just to be sure. No record of that signature. No record of that file. But there it was, embedded in the PDF metadata, signed by Aaron D., timestamped 07/1410, 06 a.m. I checked my calendar for that day. Back-to-back meetings from 9 to noon, including one with Nathan. My laptop had been left unattended for a whopping 6 minutes while I grabbed a granola bar and came back to find him sitting at my desk, saying he just needed to grab a file real quick. Son of a bitch. That's when I remembered something. Our print station, the one next to the snack fridge, had an auto login glitch. Nathan had mentioned it once, smugly laughing that it still hadn't fixed it. If you didn't log out manually, your session lingered. And if you saved credentials in browser, like half the department did because remembering passwords is apparently rocket science, they stayed cached. I hustled over and fired up the station. Chrome opened to our internal dashboard. I clicked on the file server link, still logged in as Nathan. I don't know if I was shaking or just vibrating with a kind of quiet wrath that could melt plexiglass. There it was. A hidden folder buried 2 layers deep. Resources Client Docs. Alt Docs. The period before the folder name is a cheap trick. It keeps it invisible to casual search, but not to someone who knows where to look. Inside, a trove. Email threads between Nathan and Sable's procurement team, but not through his work email, through a personal Gmail account, nathndventures@gmail.com. That's not even subtle. It's like robbing a bank and handing them your loyalty card. Attached to one of the emails was a vendor intake form, half-filled, naming Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC as the subconsultant on file. I opened the LLC registration database. Registered 2 months ago. Owner, N.D., listed at a P.O. box in Jersey City. That's not even where he lives. It's just where you send things you don't want your wife to see. The vendor contract listed Lark Bridge as project support, with a 4.5% back-end cut of all closed deals involving cloud migration strategy. Which, surprise, was exactly what Sable needed. He wasn't just cutting me out of the credit. He was siphoning company work into a shell company with a payout clause and laundering it through the back door using my name. That wasn't betrayal. That was fraud. And it was happening under the noses of a half-asleep executive team too busy praising thought leadership to notice the dead fish smell under their floorboards. I copied everything. Emailed nothing. Downloaded the files onto my personal drive, encrypted the folder, and locked it in my own cloud vault with a key that only 3 people on Earth could guess. My first dog's name, my mother's favorite wine, and the year I almost quit corporate life for a food truck in Vermont. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about precision. If Nathan wanted to play chess, fine. But he was about to learn what happens when you think the pawn in glasses doesn't know how to flip the damn board. I didn't storm into legal with evidence in one hand and righteous fury in the other. That's amateur hour. You don't corner a snake while it's still coiled, you draw a chalk circle around it and wait for it to twitch. So I played dumb. I drafted a message to the risk and compliance liaison we all called Robot Dana behind her back, because she spoke like her soul had been outsourced to an algorithm. Subject line, quick clause clarification, hypothetical scenario. Body text, hi Dana, working through some language in a potential contract for a cloud migration client. Quick question, hypothetically. If a non-registered vendor entity was inserted into a contract for internal support services, e.g., data handoff or design architecture, would that violate our indemnity coverage or trigger a policy review? Asking for cross-functional clarity, not an escalation. Appreciate your insight, I hit send. Waited, ate a stale granola bar, scrolled through a spreadsheet I didn't care about. Dana replied in 6 minutes flat. Hi Aaron, yes. The use of non-registered vendor entities within client contracts, even in support roles, represents a direct violation of both our indemnity protection clauses and our audit compliance policies. In the event of a claim or audit, such arrangements would void coverage and could trigger internal review under Board Directive 11.2b. Please let me know if this is a live case or a thought experiment. Best, Dana trigger words, void coverage, internal review board directive, like music, but the kind of music you only play when you're setting the stage for someone's career obituary. I stared at the email and just breathed, not because I was scared, because I was ready. I opened the original contract, not Nathan's corrupted Frankenstein draft, the master doc, the one that still had my fingerprints on the bones. I created a new addendum, titled it Vendor Oversight Disclosure. Clause 6.3 Clarification. Wrote it in the driest, most boring legalese I could muster. Any deliverables outlined in Section 6.3 of this agreement, if conducted via third-party or auxiliary support structures, must be disclosed per policy 11.2b and registered within the company vendor intake framework before execution. Noncompliance may trigger indemnity policy suspension. I slipped that addendum into the tail end of the document. Quiet, surgical, tucked between signature lines and the arbitration clause, like a tripwire hidden in tall grass. Next, I updated the contract metadata. Timestamped the version, noted a quiet revision in the changelog, and uploaded the new version to the shared drive under the expected name. Sable Contract Final Q3v4. DocX. Same name Nathan would search for. Same file path. Just one very sharp, invisible hook embedded inside. Then I went further. I created a second file. Looked exactly the same, except it was the version he had tried to push through. With the forged signature, the vague designated holding structure nonsense, and that quietly damning vendor clause. I renamed it Sable Backup Draft Refonly DocX and uploaded it to a private folder only I could see. Why? Because when people get caught, they panic. They delete, overwrite, scrub history like digital janitors. But this time, when the panic started, there'd be a full mirror copy, and it wouldn't be me who was unprepared. I left the office that night calm, not triumphant, just clean, the way a surgeon feels after pulling the last stitch and tossing their gloves in the bin. Nathan still thought he was running the show, still sending me cheerful little Slack messages like, "Thanks again for helping smooth this out, Aaron. You're the glue here," smiling face with smiling eyes. I smiled back. Typed, of course. Just making sure it sticks, because glue's funny like that. Sometimes it binds. Sometimes it rips when you pull too hard. Nathan stopped by my desk the Friday before the leadership sync like he was handing out cruise tickets. Leaned on the partition, wearing that smug half-smile that makes women in open offices clench their teeth and HR policies go dusty. "Heads up," he said, voice dipped in faux camaraderie. "You're looped into the leadership meeting next week. Big update on Sable. No pressure, just be ready to say thanks when the deal gets mentioned." I tilted my head like I was absorbing a compliment, not a warning. "Oh," I said sweetly. "Should I bring the file for review?" He waved it off like I'd offered to alphabetize his dirty laundry. "Nah, it's locked. Just optics, really. We close the loop," you nod, execs clap, everyone moves on. "You know the dance?" I nodded. "Sure, Nathan, I'll bring the file." He winked, then wandered off toward the espresso machine to rehearse his acceptance speech in front of the frothing wand. But I didn't move, not yet. I sat very still, fingers resting lightly on the keyboard, mind running a clean systems check. I knew what he was planning, a public coronation. Take the win, scrub the risk, leave me smiling in the background like a loyal footnote. That was fine. He wanted optics. It was going to get a damn slideshow. I spent the weekend printing. Not emails, not revenge rants, just paper. Cold, dated, cross-reference paper. 2 binders. One labeled Sable Contract executed internal. The other Sable Contract altered draft ND. Identical covers, very different contents. Nathan's version was a corpse in a tuxedo, looked formal, smelled like fraud. My version was clean, data matched, signatures valid. The disclosure clause nestled right where legal needed it to be. A full audit trail of file history, vendor intake documentation, even the innocuous email to Dana from Risk, just in case anyone wanted to argue about context. I printed a third thing, too. A 1-page executive summary with 3 bullet points and a footnote, because execs love bullet points and hate footnotes, which is why the footnote included the line, "Vendor Entity Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC does not appear in approved database records as of this publication date." Monday came. I dressed like I was heading to a funeral with catered coffee. Navy blazer, loose hair, no jewelry. Professional but forgettable. Let him shine. Let him sweat. The best bait is the one that smiles back at you. The meeting room was all glass and fake greenery. 12 executives, 3 consultants, 1 CFO who hadn't blinked since 2019. Nathan strolled in last, carrying nothing, wearing everything. Confidence, cologne, and that recycled story about how he just knew Sable was the one. I slipped into my seat with both binders in a plain black bag and placed the one labeled executed gently on the table in front of me. Nathan caught my eye, raised his eyebrows, then gave a small nod like, "Good soldier." The meeting droned on. Q2 projections, sales milestones, a slide about employee engagement that made me want to set something on fire. Then it came. "Before we close," Nathan said, standing up like he was accepting an award, "I'd like to recognize a huge win for our team. The Sable Enterprises contract is officially closed and onboarding is already in motion. Massive thanks to everyone who supported this effort, especially Aaron, who really helped clean up the final details." He looked at me like I was supposed to nod, maybe even blush. Instead, I smiled. "Congratulations, Nathan," I said. Then I unzipped the bag, pulled out the binder, and placed it in front of me, slow, deliberate, like a poker player revealing the river card. I thought it might be helpful to walk through the file for anyone who wants context, I added, voice casual. The room fell into that specific silence, the kind where no one wants to cough because they might miss the sound of a career detonating. Nathan's smile twitched. "Oh, that won't be necessary," he said too quickly. "Everything's been sent through." I opened the binder anyway. "Actually," I said, flipping to the tab with the disclosure clause, I noticed a small discrepancy in the IP language when I reviewed the original file. Just wanted to make sure everyone had the most recent version, especially legal. The clause about vendor entities was, let's say, interesting. A rustle of papers. The GC leaned forward, and Nathan finally blinked. The game had started, and I was holding every damn piece. Nathan began speaking like he was delivering a sermon at a church built entirely out of buzzwords. He stood at the head of the table, arms slightly outstretched, palms facing down, like he was baptizing us all in a shallow puddle of his own ambition. "We've come a long way this quarter," he began, pacing slow like a tech speaker who practiced in the mirror too long. "There were bumps, sure, but thanks to some bold direction and real-time agility, we not only stabilized, we won." No one was taking notes. Half the execs were checking phones under the table. The CFO looked like he was solving quantum equations on a legal pad. But Nathan, he was glowing, lit from within by the raw ego of a man convinced no one could see the trapdoor beneath his feet. "And I want to take a moment to spotlight one of our most important strategic acquisitions this quarter," he said, raising his voice just a hair. "Sable Enterprises. A seven-figure contract that positions us not only as a service provider, but as an industry thought partner." He let that phrase hang in the air like it had weight. Thought partner. I've seen post-it notes with more vision. Nathan continued, eyes flicking across the table like he was measuring applause before it even arrived. "This deal was personal," he said. "It took patience, precision, and a lot of trust building behind the scenes. But we got it done. And I'd like to thank Erin Daniels, who helped in the final stretch, really stepped in and played her part like a true team player." I smiled. No teeth. Just the kind of expression you wear when you're watching a man build his gallows out of recycled talking points. "Congratulations," I said softly. Then I reached down, unzipped the side of my bag, and slid the black binder onto the table like it was just another report. The cover made a soft thunk as it landed. Nathan's smile twitched. He glanced at it, then glanced at me. The air shifted, just a hair. You know that feeling right before lightning cracks, like the room is holding its breath? "I brought the finalized file," I said, tapping the binder once. "Figured if we're all celebrating, we should make sure legal and compliance have the most updated copy." The general counsel, who hadn't spoken all morning, perked up like someone had just whispered the word liability. He reached across the table, fingers already flipping open the cover. "Appreciated," he murmured, scanning the index. "Is this the one with the disclosure addendum?" Nathan blinked. "Disclosure?" I tilted my head innocently. "Oh, the note regarding vendor protocol," I said. "Clause 6.3? Legal flagged it last week. There was some confusion around third-party support structures and IP custody. I included the email chain in the appendix." A few more heads turned. One of the directors, Paula, sharp as nails and twice as deadly, leaned in and started flipping pages. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait, this isn't the version I saw in the summary brief." "That's because the summary used a draft Nathan prepared," I said, still calm. "This is the executed version. Time-stamped. Includes the audit trail, updated IP clause, vendor registry note, and the compliance disclosure." The flipping sound grew louder. More pages turned. The CEO, who until now had been multitasking with one AirPod in, slowly removed it. "Aaron," he said evenly, "are you saying the brief we were shown last week didn't include this disclosure?" Nathan laughed too loud, too fast. "It's just a formatting issue," he blurted out. "I mean, we were working on a live document. I must have sent an earlier draft. You sent the draft with Aaron's digital signature on it," Paula interrupted, her tone turning surgical. "The one she never signed. That's in the appendix too, page 28. The room went still. I didn't gloat, didn't move. I just kept my hands folded on the table and let the silence tighten around his neck like a silk noose." Nathan looked at me, not with anger, with dawning horror. Because in that moment, he finally realized what I'd done. He thought I was the support role, the backstage help, the woman who smiled and vanished. But what I handed him was the script, and he'd just read it straight into his own funeral. The general counsel adjusted his glasses like he was about to dissect a corpse, not a contract. He turned to Nathan, binder open, one finger tapping the page like a metronome counting down to implosion. "Nathan," he said, tone all gravel and steel, "this vendor line, the payment structure references an entity not listed in our master vendor registry. Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC, you want to clarify that for us?" Nathan's mouth opened, and stalled like an old car in a winter ditch. "Oh, that's probably just a placeholder," he said quickly. "You know, boilerplate. I think legal pulled it from an old draft." "I am legal," the GC replied flatly. More paper rustled. The CFO flipped ahead. "It's listed in 3 places. Support role, IP handoff, and audit support. None of those went through intake. And there's a payment schedule." "I mean, I didn't submit that version," Nathan stammered. "That was Aaron's draft, right?" "Aaron, that was the version you had me review?" I tilted my head. No smile now, just the cold stare of a woman who kept every receipt and memorized the timestamps. "No," I said calmly. "That version has my signature, but I never signed it. That's why page 28 includes metadata and a screenshot of my login history. The original file was modified at a time I wasn't logged in. It's the only version where Lark Bridge Holdings appears." Paula looked up from the binder. "You forged her signature?" Nathan's face drained. I wouldn't say forged, the general counsel cut him off. I just did. The CEO leaned forward, voice low. Nathan, what is Lark Bridge Holdings? And there it was, the moment. I could have let it hang. Watched him scramble like a trapped rat under fluorescent lights. But no, this wasn't about theater. It was about clarity. So I spoke, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. You might want to ask him about Lark Bridge Holdings, LLC, I said, turning toward the CEO. Because it's not in our vendor registry. But it is registered to a P.O. box in Jersey City. Same street his personal LLC used back in 2022 for a short-lived dev consultancy. And the email coordinating with Sable's procurement? That's not from his company account. It's from nathndventures@gmail.com. A sound escaped Nathan, part denial, part whimper. The GC's eyes widened slightly. He pulled out his phone. This just escalated to audit, he muttered. The CFO stood, quietly, like he didn't want to disturb a burial in progress. Nathan reached across the table toward the binder. This is all being blown out of proportion. Don't touch that, the GC snapped. You're done touching things. The CEO exhaled slowly, then turned to me. Aaron, you said there's an audit trail? I nodded. Full version history, access logs, duplicate backups. I've included a flash drive in the back pocket of the binder, along with the email chain with risk from last week. Compliance has already seen the language. There's a note from Dana in their flagging indemnity risks. Tension thickened like smoke. No one moved. Nathan finally slumped back in his chair, fingers twitching on the table, face pale and gleaming with sweat under the overhead lights. The room was watching him, colleagues, execs, people who'd once nodded along to his grandstanding, now seeing him for what he was, a man who thought fraud could wear a blazer and walk unnoticed. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, and in that silence you could feel everything shifting. Power, reputation, consequence, and I didn't say another word because there was nothing left to say. The general counsel stood first. We're pausing here, he said to the room, but it was directed squarely at the panic sweat pooling under Nathan's collar. This goes directly to internal audit. I'm alerting compliance. We'll reconvene after preliminary review. The CEO turned, not with anger, but something colder, disappointment laced with calculation. Nathan, he said, voice low but firm, please step out. We'll follow up once legal completes the internal briefing. Nathan looked around like he was searching for a parachute in a locked elevator. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No one looked back at him. Not even Paula, who used to share bagels with him on Thursdays. Not even the junior exec who once called him a visionary during an offsite at that sad little golf resort. Nathan stood slowly, one hand on the back of his chair, the other still twitching toward the binder like he thought he could unflip those pages with enough willpower. Thanks, everyone, he muttered. No one replied. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded more final than any gavel I've ever heard. The room stayed still for a few long seconds. Then the GC gathered the binder, closed it with surgical precision, and slid it under his arm like he was carrying evidence straight to the vault. Within the hour, IT revoked Nathan's account access. His badge was deactivated before he even cleared the elevator. A compliance lockout alert popped up in the internal system at 3:41 p.m. HR sent a meeting request titled simply offboarding procedures for the following morning. And me, I went back to my desk like it was any other Tuesday. 30 minutes later, the VP of strategy stopped by my cubicle. Quiet, low profile. No fanfare. Aaron, she said. The board's reviewing Nathan's accounts and his pipeline. We'd like to offer you a transitional leadership role, client relations, and strategic partnerships. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear. I knew something was off when the fire marshal called me before sunrise, asking why Leventra Tech's $300K product launch event didn't have a valid assembly license on file. I was still in my robe, stirring instant coffee with a pen cap because my spoons had all mysteriously disappeared, probably hiding out with my last shred of patience. He sounded confused. I wasn't. Not really, because deep down, I already knew Claire had screwed something up. The only surprise was that the match had been lit this early. Usually, chaos slept in till noon and showed up in heels. But let's rewind, because if you don't know Claire, oh boy, you're in for a treat. And before we get into that mess, real quick, if you're enjoying this already, tap that like button and subscribe. Seriously, 90% of you forget, and it genuinely keeps our little storytelling team caffeinated and petty. We've got more tales of office lunacy than HR has awkward pamphlets about team synergy. Anyway, Claire, fresh out of a marketing immersion program that probably involved a lot of TikTok strategy and $18 smoothies. She arrived like a reality show contestant who accidentally wandered into a real company. I'm here to modernize Leventra, she chirped on her first day, in shoes that had never touched a cubicle floor. I'd been with the company 11 years. I'd survived 4 reorgs, 2 hostile acquisitions, and 1 CFO who faked a heart attack to avoid a budget meeting. I didn't blink when Claire was parachuted in as head of product launch. We'd all seen this movie before. Only this time, it came with a trust fund and influencer energy. She didn't notice me much. People like Claire rarely notice operations folks unless the espresso machine breaks or someone forgets to reorder the oat milk. I kept the gears turning quietly, efficiently. That's what I did. When a shipment got stuck at customs, I made calls. When we needed a city permit approved for a venue in under 3 days, I massaged timelines and pulled strings from contacts I'd built over a decade. No glory, no press releases. Just the backbone of the company nobody bothered to see until something went wrong. And something was going wrong. I knew it the second my system pinged me with a routine alert. Event license compliance, auto-renewal flag pending. Normally, that wouldn't raise an eyebrow. But I remembered Claire loudly telling everyone in the Monday status meeting that she'd handled all the logistics herself. She said it like she'd just performed open-heart surgery. In reality, she'd uploaded a Canva invitation and spent 2 hours choosing between shades of blush pink for the napkins. Still, I wasn't paid to care about people's delusions. If Claire wanted to play launch queen, fine. But the thing about legacy systems and legacy staff is that sometimes wires stay connected in places the new kids don't know exist, especially if the compliance systems were built during a merger and no one bothered to map out who actually had admin rights after the dust settled. Which, spoiler alert, meant me. I sat at my desk that afternoon, watching Claire flounce around the open plan office, her assistant trailing behind her with a ring light and iced matcha like some kind of tech-themed pageant. The developers looked up briefly, mostly because her heels echoed off the laminate flooring like a drumline. Michelle, Claire said with a practiced smile, we're all set for the event, just so you know. But I've got it covered so you don't have to worry. She always said things like that, like she was handing me a favor instead of slowly walking into a minefield with sparkler candles in each hand. Good to know, I said, sipping my coffee, now full of pen ink and bitterness. But I was watching and waiting, because the thing about systems is they remember everything, even the things people think they've deleted. It was the Thursday before the launch. A dry run walkthrough at the venue in Midtown, some overpriced glass box with a name like Echelon or Axis or something else that sounded like a rejected Bond villain. I wasn't supposed to be there originally, but logistics had looped me in late. Something about a vendor being confused over load-in times and asking for a second compliance check. Claire hadn't responded to emails, per usual, so I showed up with a clipboard and a gritted jaw. The venue smelled like citrus and ambition. Contractors were setting up LED panels, flower arrangements were being fluffed to look casually extravagant, and the audio guys were already sweating through their branded polos. Everyone was moving, buzzing, doing. And in the middle of it all, Claire, wearing a satin jumpsuit and a Bluetooth headset like she was directing the Oscars. Not a hair out of place, but chaos vibrating in the wake of every gesture she made. I stayed out of her way, checked load capacities, made small talk with the fire inspector, confirmed the HVAC unit hadn't tripped since last inspection. Quiet work, the kind that keeps events from ending in lawsuits. I was about to leave when Claire spotted me. Her eyes flicked down to my loafers like they'd personally insulted her great-grandmother. She excused herself from a group of interns who were nodding so hard I thought they might sprain something. Michelle, hey, she said, pulling me aside near the foam marble. Her voice had that syrupy tone people use when they're about to tell you you're dying, only less compassionate. I just wanted to touch base. Sure, I said, professional smile locked in place. So the event, she leaned in as if she were doing me a kindness. It's a really curated guest list. Very visual. A lot of VIPs, influencers, photographers, and I want to be super transparent with you. That was the moment I felt my stomach drop. Not because I didn't know what was coming, but because she had rehearsed this. She had practiced it in the mirror. She was enjoying it. I think it's best if you don't attend, she said brightly. It's not personal, it's just, you don't exactly fit the aesthetic we're going for. There it was, out in the open like a dead bird on your doorstep. I blinked once, twice, let it hit, let it sting. And then I smiled, the same way you do when someone cuts you off in traffic and flips you off for existing. That detached, feral kind of calm, of course, I said. Good luck with everything. She beamed like she'd just given me a spa day. Thank you, I knew you'd understand. What she didn't notice was the way the room shifted around us. How the caterer paused mid-box lift. How two junior designers, both barely out of college, exchanged wide-eyed glances. It wasn't just the insult, it was the casualness of it. The surgical precision with which she dismissed over a decade of work like I was a coat rack in the wrong color. I walked out, my heels echoing down the hallway louder than her entire marketing plan. My face was stone, my chest was fire. I didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't even flinch when the elevator doors closed, but something had moved inside me. A gear clicked, not revenge, not yet, just clarity. Later that afternoon, I was back at my desk, answering a backlog of vendor emails Claire had ignored. Half listening to the company Slack, I saw a thread from Claire's assistant pop up in the events channel, all set for Saturday. Claire handled venue and compliance herself. CEO confirmed she's leading the full rollout. Party flexed #boss energy, of course she did. And of course she announced it like she'd solved world hunger with an Excel spreadsheet. She had no idea what she hadn't handled, no idea what box had never been ticked. But I did, and I had the keys. I didn't go home right away that night. Instead, I sat at my desk in the ops wing past 6 after the lights dimmed and the snack cart had done its final lap. That wing of the building always went quiet early. Sales had their happy hours, design had their rooftop wine nights, and marketing lived on Instagram Live. Ops, we just finished things. I logged into the back-end systems, mostly out of habit. I'd spent more years in this dashboard than I'd spent married. It was ancient, clunky, a Frankenstein's monster built out of 3 acquisitions and 1 panicked rebrand. No one under 30 could use it without breaking something. But me, I knew every tab, every flag, every dangerous little button buried in its dusty corners. The event permit record was right where I thought it'd be, filed under Leventra Tech Event NYC April 22 Tempoth. That Tempoth at the end was key. It meant the city had approved it provisionally, pending a final compliance box being checked before midnight on the day prior. Specifically, a form labeled LTX61A, a mind-numbingly boring document that asked questions like will fog machines be used indoors, and are strobe lights visible from public roads, the kind of thing Claire wouldn't know existed unless it had a Spotify playlist and a mood board. And sure enough, the box next to Final Assembly Compliance Verified Auto Renew License was still gray, unticked, floating there in digital limbo. I sat back in my chair, arms crossed, no music, no dramatic lighting, just the hum of the overhead fluorescence and the soft, almost sad sigh of a printer spitting out some forgotten invoice nearby. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I wasn't even hurt. What I felt was something else, something cleaner. I felt done. Claire had made a decision. Not just to humiliate me, but to walk past me like I didn't exist, like the bones of the company she now strutted across weren't held together by people like me. People who stayed late, who answered the damn phone when city compliance called, who remembered how every weird little legacy system plugged into the next. And the funniest part? No one had even thought to revoke my access. During the last org chart shuffle, it moved my title from ops director to logistics consultant. Some VP thought it sounded more modern. But titles don't change backend permissions unless someone manually updates them. And no one had, not in 2 years, so I could still touch everything. I could see the license flags. I could see the override settings. I could see the fallbacks that it had rigged up after a venue fiasco in 19, when we'd nearly been shut down by the fire department during a product demo involving dry ice and a poorly placed outlet. I didn't tick the box. I didn't untick it either. I just looked at it. Technically speaking, no license had been fully issued. The provisional would expire at midnight, and without the auto-renew flag enabled, the system would default to non-compliant and ping the city event system. A quiet little flag. No sirens. Just a simple status update in the database. Non-active, final compliance unverified. I hovered over the field, not with glee, not with wrath, just curiosity. Then I opened my calendar, clicked over to Saturday at 11:45 p.m., and set a silent notification, check permit record. No plan, no plot, just a note. After all, if Claire really did handle everything like she claimed, if she had all the details locked down and the compliance box ticked, then the license would renew automatically. If she hadn't, well, that would be unfortunate for her. I logged out, closed the dashboard, packed up my things and walked out into the cool night air. Midtown always smelled like hot garbage and broken dreams after dark. But tonight it had a different scent. Something sharp, something electric, something like inevitability. Claire posted her first Instagram story at 7:06 p.m. It was a boomerang champagne flutes clinking midair in some rooftop bar with skyline views and just the right amount of sunset. Tagline in gold script: tomorrow, we dominate NYC. Kiss Sparkles #launch queens #Leventra glow up by 7:22, she'd posted another one. A slow pan across a candlelit table with name cards and oyster towers. I counted 12 faces I recognized, marketing leads, investor reps, her old roommate who somehow got a consulting badge and now called herself the brand energy facilitator. The audio was a remix of something popular enough to get stuck in your head for days. At 8:05 she went live. "Hey babes, we're celebrating something major tonight," she said, sweeping the camera across the room. "This launch is gonna change everything. Like everything. We've got press in town. Our partners are landing tonight, manifesting a flawless rollout. Leventra is going big, baby." She panned past a waiter holding a cake shaped like the new product. Frosted circuits, candied leads. I actually laughed at that one, loud enough that my cat bolted from the kitchen counter. The TV was off, no music, just me, my couch, and the soft glow of Claire's filtered reality playing out on a 6-inch screen. I sat in that silence for a long time, holding the phone, not scrolling, just thinking. About the time I stayed in the office till 3 a.m. to fix a logistics outage during a holiday rush. The way I missed my godson's recital to chase down a missing freight container that turned out to be sitting in a warehouse, mislabeled as bamboo flooring. The bonus I never got because budgets were tight, while Claire's job came with a designer laptop bag and a welcome bouquet bigger than my last raise. I thought about every Saturday I worked without extra pay. Every time I was told I was too essential to promote. Every manager who said we'd be lost without Michelle, but somehow always found the budget for a new PR hire with a TikTok following. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't even change into pajamas. I just stood up, walked to my desk, and turned on my laptop. The screen flickered to life like it already knew what I was about to do. I logged into the compliance system at 11:43 p.m. The event file was still sitting there. Leventra Tech Event NYC April 22 Tempoth. The auto-renew flag was still active. The override logic, designed to give IT a 12-hour buffer in case something glitched, was still enabled. Claire had touched none of it. She hadn't even opened the record since uploading the initial draft. Her entire permit was a sandcastle waiting for high tide. I hovered over the auto-renew license field, uncheck. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to disable auto-renewal? Yes. Next, I opened the Override Logic tab, scroll, disable contingency fallback, save. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Nothing flashy happened. No alarms, no cinematic countdown, just a dull flicker as the system refreshed and accepted the changes. Then I closed the tab, shut the laptop, and sat back in my chair. That was it. That's all it took. One click and the provisional permit became a ticking clock. Claire's empire now had 24 hours to live. Unless someone, somewhere, noticed. Unless someone remembered to tick a box in a system only 3 people on staff even understood. Unless someone who didn't fit the aesthetic showed up to fix it for her. I went to bed at 12:04 a.m., slept like a baby. First thing I heard that morning was my phone vibrating itself off the nightstand like it had something to confess. I cracked one eye open and saw the screen blinking like a dying firefly. 12 missed calls, 9 Slack mentions, 3 voicemails. The timestamp reads 6:12 a.m. My apartment was still wrapped in that soft, early light that makes you think, for just a second, that the day might be gentle. It wasn't. I rolled over, groaned, and unlocked my phone. First Slack message, 5:44 a.m. From someone in events I barely knew. Hey Michelle, do we have the actual license doc for today's launch? Venue says something's missing, then rapid fire, update, security says they can't let anyone inside. Something about a city flag, police are at the loading dock, not sure if that's related. Is this a drill or? I sat up, rubbed my face, let out a low, exhausted laugh that sounded like it came from somewhere beneath my bones. Coffee. First coffee. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot, and started the kettle. Opened Slack on my laptop while it heated up. The group chat was a digital wildfire. Claire's team was spinning in all directions, half blaming the venue, half blaming some poor junior comms guy who was now apparently in charge of permits. Legal had joined the thread at some point around 5:58 a.m. I scrolled past a dozen panicked emojis and one extremely unhelpful gif of a dumpster fire. That's when someone finally tagged me directly. At Michelle, hey, sorry to bug so early, but looks like you're still listed as primary compliance officer on backend. Do you know what's going on with the city file? Still listed. Of course I was. Claire hadn't changed a damn thing. No reassignment. No role update. No thought given to who actually had responsibility. Only who looked good holding the mic. I typed back slowly, calmly, fingers steady on the keys. You'll need to call the city events office directly. The file was flagged non-compliant at 12:01 a.m. when the final verification wasn't received. They'll have a status report on file. Let me know if I can assist further. I clicked send, closed the laptop, poured hot water over the grounds. The smell of dark roast bloomed through the kitchen like an exhale. Behind me, the Slack feed continued to churn, messages pinging like popcorn in a microwave. I ignored it, picked up my mug, sat at the window, took a sip. The world outside was just beginning to wake up, delivery trucks grumbling, joggers bouncing past with AirPods and self-loathing. But inside, in that quiet pocket of time before full daylight, I sat perfectly still. No gloating, no panic. Just a steady, full-bodied stillness that filled every corner of my chest. Didn't need to call anyone, didn't need to explain. The system had spoken for me. It had spoken for itself, really. The same system Claire had ignored, the one she thought didn't matter because it wasn't intimacy or viral or full of sparkle. Compliance is never glamorous, but it is absolute. By 6:27 a.m., I got a text from our head of legal. Can you hop on a quick call at 7:15? Board may have some questions. I texted back, sure. I'll be ready. Then I refilled my coffee, took another long sip, and smiled into the steam. By 8:03 a.m., the launch was supposed to be mid-sound check, with lattes in branded cups and interns escorting influencers to VIP experience zones no one could quite define. Instead, the lobby of the Echelon Event Center was packed with media vans, baffled investors, and Claire, locked outside in full glam with a camera flash popping every 2 seconds like she was entering a crime scene instead of her own self-thrown coronation. I stood in the break room with a styrofoam cup of machine coffee and watched it unfold live on Channel 7. Claire stepped out of her town car in head-to-toe designer, the kind of outfit that looks expensive but says, I definitely didn't pay for this myself. Sunglasses the size of dinner plates, lips glossed to mirror finish, hair in a high bun that must have taken half a can of spray. She strutted toward the venue entrance like royalty returning from exile, until she hit the glass doors. A security guard stopped her just short of the velvet rope. There was no screaming, no yanking of lanyards, just a quiet, almost embarrassed exchange caught clearly on every paparazzi lens. She gestured with her hands, then pointed toward the building, then to herself. Security guard didn't flinch. He leaned down and said something we couldn't hear, but we didn't need audio. The moment said everything. She turned toward her assistant, who was now frantically whispering into her phone, and then toward the growing crowd of cameras. That's when the reporters started asking questions. Claire, is it true you didn't file the permits? Claire, are the investors still attending? Claire, are you still leading this launch? To her credit, she held it together. Chin lifted, lips parted like she was about to deliver a TED talk no one asked for. But you could see it in the way her nostrils flared. The way her friend Harper slowly drifted 3 feet back, holding her phone like she was just answering an urgent email. Claire reached for the door again. Locked. Behind her, a group of suited men, investors, judging by the identical leather briefcases and look of disgusted inconvenience, walked up and were also denied entry. They demanded answers. One of them pointed at his watch and said something sharp. A second later, a new figure appeared, the venue manager. Gray suit, clipboard, permanent frown. Apologies, folks, he said to the gathered crowd, voice just loud enough to be picked up by the live news mic. Per city ordinance, this venue is now restricted from assembly until valid licensing is confirmed. There is no active permit on file for this event. Boom. Could see it hit Claire like a slap. Her shoulders dropped a full inch. The gloss on her lips couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. The camera panned in for the close-up. I sipped my coffee. Harper took a discreet step farther away, then turned completely around and walked back toward the sidewalk. Claire reached for her phone, then yanked it away like it had burned her. The assistant said something, eyes wide. Inside the break room, a few of my coworkers trickled in, eyes locked on the TV. No one said a word. Someone opened a granola bar. Someone else filled their water bottle and stared blankly at the screen like it was a nature documentary about endangered ego. I didn't say anything, didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched, quietly. A little while later, the coverage cut to a talking head speculating about potential financial damage and how this kind of public embarrassment could affect future brand partnerships. I turned the volume down and leaned back in my chair. The room buzzed with soft whispers. She really didn't file the permit? Didn't Michelle used to handle that stuff? She's probably still in the system. No one said my name out loud. They didn't have to. I finished my coffee and left the break room. Back to my desk. Back to emails. Back to watching the empire that tried to erase me slowly leak foundation through a hole its queen didn't even know existed. Emergency call was set for 9:30 a.m. sharp. The subject line read, NYC launch status immediate review. No pleasantries, no RSVP buttons, just a link, a time, and the kind of all-caps urgency that usually precedes layoffs or lawsuits. By 9:31, the virtual boardroom was full, 15 faces boxed into a grid of forced concern and boardroom buttocks. Legal was there, of course, grim and overcaffeinated. The VP of Ops, who hadn't returned a single one of my memos since 2022, sat stone-faced. Claire joined 10 minutes late, her background blurred but not quite enough to hide the fact she was still outside the venue, hair unraveling in the wind, jaw clenched so tight you could hear it through the microphone. The CEO hadn't spoken yet. He sat silently in the center box, arms crossed, forehead resting on steepled fingers. His daughter was unraveling on national television, and he knew it. Let's get to it, said someone from legal. We need to establish what failed in the permit chain. Our insurance rider is already being questioned. Claire jumped in first, voice clipped and defensive. Operations was supposed to handle compliance. I delegated the back-end stuff. That was never my domain. I was focused on forward-facing strategy. I leaned back in my chair and muted myself. Someone from IT spoke up next. We pulled the back-end logs. The event file was last updated at 11:47 p.m. last night. Auto-renew was disabled, override logic removed. The last access came from Michelle Lane's credentials. Every square on the call turned toward me like a synchronized firing squad. I unmuted. Yes, I said calmly. That's correct. Can you explain, legal asked, why you made that change? I opened my prepared document, because of course I had one, and shared my screen. It was a clean, time-stamped timeline. Entries highlighted, Slack messages clipped, email headers intact. It read like a case study in preemptive defense. The auto-renewal was scheduled based on final compliance confirmation. As of 11:43 p.m., the required fields had not been updated. I disabled renewal in accordance with SOP 18C, which governs permit integrity in the absence of verified data. I also disabled the override because the fallback settings were built for confirmed staff sign-offs, and I had not received authorization to act on behalf of the event. Silence. Then I added, Claire stated multiple times that she had handled everything personally and instructed me not to attend the event walkthrough or be involved in the final prep. I complied with her request. Claire's voice cut in. Brittle and too loud. That's a distortion. I never said I have the Slack message here, I interrupted, scrolling to the screenshot. Claire's chat bubble and perky pastels, all good. Don't worry about launch stuff, Michelle. This is my moment, face blowing a kiss. There was a pause, then I dropped it. The sentence I'd rehearsed only once but knew would land like a brick. She asked me not to attend, I said I'd embarrass the company, so I made sure not to be involved. Silence again. Now, no one dared to break it. The CEO blinked slowly, still saying nothing. Someone from the board cleared their throat as if trying to swallow the awkwardness. Claire's video feed glitched, then went dark. Whether it was connection loss or strategic retreat, no one knew and no one cared. I unshared my screen, muted myself again, and folded my hands. The thing about truth is, when it's documented, you don't need to shout it. You just need to show up prepared. And I was prepared. Surgical, even, detached. Let the logs speak. Let the system trace every step. I'd done nothing wrong, but I had done something very right. By noon, the press had the headline. It wasn't from Leventra's official channels. It came from a tech blog that lived for exactly this kind of glossy disaster. The title read, Launch Failure at Leventra, CEO's Daughter Denied Entry to Her Own Event. Underneath, subhead, Compliance Lapse Blamed for NYC Catastrophe. Insiders point to leadership negligence. Inside the office, it was pin drop quiet. Claire's name had vanished from the launch Slack channel by 12:37 p.m. By 1:10 p.m., her calendar privileges were revoked. By 2 o'clock p.m., an email hit everyone's inbox. Effective immediately, Claire Worthen has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. In the interim, launch-related inquiries should be directed to the operations office. We thank Michelle Lane for identifying the compliance issue in time to prevent additional legal exposure. Her diligence is appreciated. It was short, clinical, the kind of corporate prose written by 3 lawyers and a PR team on their 3rd coffee run, but I read it twice anyway. Then I archived it and went back to my spreadsheet. The funny thing was, I didn't feel triumphant. No confetti dropped from the ceiling. No slow clap from the interns. Just that same quiet hum of servers and inbox pings, and the faint scent of burnt popcorn from someone who never read the breakroom rules. The fallout hit hard and fast. Investors were furious. Some had flown in from Europe, Asia, South America, all expecting a glittering launch that had instead turned into a headline they now had to explain to their shareholders. At least 2 partners issued formal complaints demanding reimbursement for travel and breach of agreement. One particularly irate venture rep allegedly stood outside the Echelon lobby and screamed into his phone for 12 straight minutes. My favorite part? He was screaming at Claire's assistant, who was last seen Ubering away from the venue, clutching a stack of branded tote bags like they might save her. The CEO tried damage control, held a closed-door call with the board, then scheduled one-on-ones with key stakeholders to rebuild trust. But the story had leaked, and you can't mop up what's already gone viral. That evening, as I was packing up, HR slid a sealed envelope onto my desk. I opened it to find an official retention offer, salary bump, bonus payout, and a formal request to consult on future high-priority launches moving forward. I read it, nodded, slipped it into my drawer without signing it. Not yet. At 6:15 p.m., I passed the executive floor on the way out. Claire's office door was wide open, empty, her nameplate removed. The only thing left was a lone orchid drooping toward the floor like it knew something had died. I paused just long enough to look, not to gloat, not to revel, just to observe, full circle. Claire had tried to make the launch about her, but the system didn't care about selfies or style or brand elevation. It cared about boxes, flags, procedures, and when those were ignored, it didn't whisper. It screamed. All I did was let the system speak. I never needed revenge, just accuracy, and maybe a little silence to enjoy it. The resignation hit the press 3 days later, not from Leventra's comms team, of course. We're still hiding behind no-comment statements and waiting for the legal dust to settle. But someone from Claire's PR agency must have realized the optics were unsalvageable. They leaked a carefully scripted exclusive to a lifestyle publication known more for skincare routines than tech shakeups. Claire Worthen steps away from Leventra to pursue creative independence. Sure, the same day, a handful of investors formally withdrew from 2 upcoming Claire-led initiatives. One of them had already transferred support to a rival firm, citing a renewed focus on operational reliability. Another simply said, "We can't build on unstable ground." Inside the office, things quieted down. People moved on fast. That's the way it always goes. Launches come and go, headlines flare and fade, and everyone pretends they weren't just one decision away from disaster. But the logs don't forget. Friday morning, I came in early, before the lights clicked on automatically, before the team's chatter filled the halls. I brewed a proper cup of coffee from my stash, none of that shared breakroom poison, then sat at my desk and opened the backend system one last time. The dashboard loaded slowly, like it knew it was about to let go of something important. Under Event Access Management, Claire's name still sat in faded gray, permissions suspended but not yet scrubbed. I clicked through the admin panel, reviewed the records, then hovered over the final alert tied to her credentials. Temporary administrative override. Claire Worthen NYC launch 2023 delete. A single click. The confirmation window popped up. Are you sure you want to delete this record? Yes, it was gone, no fanfare, no dramatic music, just a clean database again. Order restored. I leaned back, eyes on the screen, then reached for my coffee. Outside the window, the city buzzed. Unbothered as always, trucks honked. Sirens wailed somewhere distant. Life resumed. A few minutes later, a new hire from marketing wandered by, tablet in hand, looking dazed. Hey, she said, sorry to bother. I just started last week and I've heard bits and pieces, but what actually happened at the launch? I smiled. Not big, just enough. Always double-check the checklist, I said, and never forget who built the system. She blinked, nodded, and wandered off like I'd just handed her the secret to fire. I didn't follow up, didn't explain, didn't drop the receipts I still had printed and neatly filed in my drawer just in case history tried to rewrite itself. Because I didn't need to, the system remembered, and so did I. I turned back to my screen. A new project was already loading. Another launch. Another opportunity for someone to pretend that operations didn't matter until they did. But this time, they'd remember the silence. They'd remember who held the foundation steady. And they'd remember the woman who never raised her voice, but never missed a box. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.